The Charlotte region is poised to welcome new residents, new businesses, and new opportunities in the coming years, adding to the dynamic expansion we've been experiencing. Our future is bright as we pursue economic growth that's sustainable, inclusive, and equitable. The opportunities we have to invest in business, people, and place are in front of us. We have the will, the smarts, and the passion to make Charlotte a vibrant, innovative, and healthy region for all. We are moving forward together.
Charlotte is one of the fastest growing metros in the country. We know people are coming here. We need to make sure that the infrastructure can support that growth.
I think it is the Charlotte way. As we compare ourselves to other major metropolitan cities in the country, we have our way of doing things in Charlotte, and it's very attractive for major corporations and a lot of young people that are very talented.
Charlotte in the 1950s was a city that wanted desperately to grow big. That was really the case when the 1944 Highway Act gave cities money for expressways, for crosstown boulevards. And Charlotte, bam, planned Independence Boulevard, which went the least politically difficult way. And folks were just basically told that it was time for them to move. 1,000 families displaced, 200 businesses closed, never reopened, churches kicked out.
Well, I think one of the dangers, and maybe we learned it from the 20th century, is to be wary of trends that result in wholesale transformation of communities. It does mean taking a closer look at what is good from the past, keeping that, preserving that, and then building on top of that.
As we go into the future, infrastructure includes anything related to innovation, technology, drones, and not just a building somewhere or a highway going through somewhere. And when you talk in terms of infrastructure connecting people, helping people to interact in the public realm, it becomes a whole different story. So you build a street not just for vehicles, but for people to be able to walk, for people to be able to meet with one another. Think about it, 30 years ago was just 1990. When you think about that. So 30 years from now, 2050, today is when we need to start making plans for that, because it means this entire area will be so totally different.
The path forward for Charlotte is clear: collaboration, reimagination, innovation. As we explore peer economies, consider what you want for the Charlotte region. We'll shape and make our future, and we'll go farther, faster when we move forward together.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Exploring Economies. I'm Carol Lovin, Executive Vice President, Chief Integration Officer, and System Chief of Staff at Atrium Health, and your 2021 Alliance Chair. So right now, I'm envisioning all of us really being in Austin or maybe Denver or Nashville, gathering for breakfast and getting ready to explore a different region. But that would be during an ordinary year. And as we know, this is no ordinary year, and neither was last year. So instead, we're taking full advantage of it and bringing it all to you. We will hear from leaders in all these cities on what they're doing in the areas that matter most to us. We've got 3 strategic priorities this year. And as I think many of you know, they are: number 1, economic revitalization; 2, racial equity in business; and 3, launching a coalition for a better 2050. And even though you've likely spent time in Austin, Denver, and Nashville, this time it's different. And this morning, I really want you to experience these visits through the lens of the Alliance, through the lens of accountability as the voice of business for the 15-county Charlotte region, because that's who we are at the Alliance. So let me give you a quick rundown of what's coming up. In a few minutes, we'll hear from our good friend, Tom Barkin. We've asked him to talk about how the Charlotte region stacks up against peer metros. Then we're going to take you to Austin and Denver to discover how those markets position themselves. And let me just pause for a moment and say that I can't mention the word Denver without saying that our hearts and thoughts are with our friends in Boulder, in Denver, across Colorado, and again across the nation with the recent tragedy that they've experienced. After that, we'll hear from 2 communities on their transit lessons, the things that worked for them, and also we're going to hear about the things that didn't. And then we'll shift topics to racial equity, something so important to our nation, incredibly important to us in this region and to the Alliance. And it's something we have to make a difference in. We have two pace setters joining us to talk about what they're doing in their regions on this topic. And through all of this, of course, we want your input. That's what we try to do at every one of these virtual meetings. So at the end of every segment, be ready because we'll do some real-time polling. And you'll see a lot of different faces this time because we want to hear insights directly on the sessions from our executive committee members at the Alliance. So we're excited to have them introduced. And of course, today is possible because of our sponsors. And so we'll take a look at them now. The session sponsor is Wells Fargo. Gold sponsor is the President's Cup. Polling sponsor, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Chairman Circle, Atrium Health, Bank of America, Centene, Lowe's, and Novant Health. And then just a couple more things. We want you to help us keep the engagement going by sharing on social, and you're going to see all the information on this slide right here. And finally, speaker bios were sent to you in advance, but we'll also be putting them in the chat as speakers join. So now it's my real privilege to introduce Tom Barkin. Tom is the president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. He's on the ground continually in the Fed's 5th district, and that covers North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, DC, West Virginia, and Maryland. He brings real attention to the things that matter most and the areas facing economic challenges. And I always try to include some fun facts, so this is a great one. Tom, I understand that you're a rules guy, or I should say rules official for the Masters, and that's pretty impressive life balance for a Federal Reserve executive. So excited to learn that about you. We are super excited to have you kick us off, and we're more than anxious to hear your thoughts on how the Charlotte region stacks up, what you're thinking about things. And for everyone, we'll have questions at the end. We'll have time for that. So be sure to get them ready and send a private chat with your question to Ashley Hedrick. So one more thing before we get started, Tom, before I turn it over to you, let's start with home. Let's take a look at these fast facts that compare us, the Charlotte region, to our peer metros. Katie, let's roll it. So a big thank you to the Charlotte Alliance research team for that. We appreciate it. And Tom, it's all yours.
Thanks, Carol. And thanks to everybody for inviting me to be with you again virtually. The last time I was with you in May, and so much has changed since then. Vaccines are being deployed at scale. And with that, we look well positioned to finally contain this virus. And as we do, the economy is positioned, I think, for a really robust year. I know I'm greatly looking forward to traveling again and to being with you in person. But today, as Carol said, you asked me to talk about something other than the economy. You asked me to talk about how I look at metro areas and how Charlotte is positioned. Now, that seems like a pretty dumb thing to do by video, to try to compare a city like Charlotte to other places. But I just want to say, I really know Charlotte is different than other places. Just as a reminder, before taking on this role, I spent 30 years in Atlanta. I sat for 20 years on its chamber's executive committee, and I know Katie Kirkpatrick will be with you a little bit later. But from that post, I saw Charlotte's rise firsthand. For years, Atlanta's main competition was Dallas. And then I'm showing you here on this slide the NASCAR Hall of Fame, because when the NASCAR Hall of Fame was awarded to Charlotte, I really saw it as a wake-up call. It became clear, at least to me, that Charlotte has a killer combo. Like Atlanta, great weather, hub airport, pro-business political environment. But Charlotte was also operating on all cylinders on what I'll call collective hustle by business and civic leadership. And that leadership still very much focused on making the region ever better. And so in that spirit, you know, I'm glad to do this. And I guess it's good to be afar, so I won't hear anyone who doesn't like any of these comparisons. So I've titled this talk Quality Wins, because I think there are 4 qualities of winning regions: a quality workforce, quality jobs, quality of life, and if I can be a little cute with words, equality. I'm going to spend some time on each and every one of them and show you comparisons to other winning regions. In the spirit of improvement, I've only picked the hot regions, so I'm not comparing you to the people you're going to beat easily. Expect these to be some tough comparisons. So let me start with quality workforce. Now, a quality workforce starts with education. There's a lot of research that shows that those with a college degree make more money, have greater wealth, are more resilient to downturns, and have better health. So let me explain this chart for a second. The x-axis is percent with a BA. The y-axis is the employment to population ratio, which is probably the best metric for labor market performance. Regions with more college grads do better. That's the upward sloping line. You'll see Charlotte ranks 8th in percent of a college degree and 8th in employment to population ratio. You can see the upside for us in places like Minneapolis or Denver or Austin, not to mention Washington, D.C. Now, how do you move the needle on college graduates? Well, you can grow your own or you can attract more. So let's start with growing your own, and let's start at the beginning with early childhood education. Another set of Fed research shows that this is the key building block for educational success. In Charlotte, about 46% of 3 and 4-year-olds pre-pandemic were enrolled in preschool. That's below the national average. And again, and I'd argue not coincidentally, putting it 8th on the list. The top regions were the same as before, which is powerful evidence of the importance of getting our kids off to the right start. I'm glad to see the recent launch of the public pre-K program in Mecklenburg County and the goal of 80% enrollment of 2024. It takes a generation, of course, but I think that has a real opportunity for impact. Now, for older kids, I was also happy to see the compelling progress in Charlotte's public schools. I don't show the same benchmarks here because standards are inconsistent, but we saw data that suggested that 4th grade reading and 4th grade math proficiency topped the 7 school systems we did find data on. And you can see in this chart the rise in graduation rates. We've had your superintendent on a recent educational disparities panel talking about the overhaul of the reading curriculum. And I also hear good things about organizations like Read Charlotte. Now, in addition to growing your own, you can draw those with higher education from other places. And from what we know pre-pandemic, Charlotte was doing this well. If you don't mind, move to the next slide. And from what I hear, COVID has been a boon as people flee crowded cities for places like Charlotte with open space, jobs, and places to live. You can see on this chart in migration and the little call out in terms of 2020. I'll speak a bit more about this in a second. So now let me turn to the second key, which is quality jobs. Next page. You all know the headquarters story in the Charlotte region. I mean, this is just an incredible list of names. And I know the momentum continues. I think I saw numbers of 10,000 jobs and $3 trillion of investment last year. Now, what maybe gets less attention is the businesses that are built in Charlotte. This chart shows business formations over the last 10 years. Over that time period, business applications have grown 6.2% a year in Charlotte. That places it near the very top of this list. And these have led to solid job growth. Charlotte, like most of these places, has grown jobs over the last 10 years at well over the national average. We picked them, remember, because these were the cities that were winning. But as I said, these are tough comparisons. And Austin and Nashville in particular have been quite hot over this time period. Now, where Charlotte has excelled is wage growth. The jobs created here have been quality jobs. And on this list, Charlotte's actually on top of everybody. Now, another lens is whether quality jobs are available even to those without a college degree. Among the 12 regions, Charlotte ranks 7th on what we call opportunity employment. It's defined there on the left. That's the share of jobs available to workers without a college degree that pay more than the national median wage. These are jobs like truck drivers, maintenance workers, and nurses. So this may be an opportunity. Now, let me turn to the third way that cities win, quality of life. And this strikes me as critical to both of the topics I've covered. A good quality of life helps you attract quality workers. It helps you attract quality jobs. Now, there are 2 people in this picture. One of them is good looking. And the good looking guy in this picture isn't me. This is my son, Sam Barkin. Sam graduated from Wake Forest in 2018. In his senior year, he and I went to the Belk Bowl. I was blown away at how active Uptown was at night. It was the place to be, and it certainly didn't feel like downtown Atlanta where Sam grew up. Sam said, you know, it's a shame I have a job somewhere else because where I'd really love to live is Charlotte. Now, how do you attract and retain millennials like Sam? There are a lot of ways to look at this, so I decided to be Sam absorbed and picked a few that really matter to Sam. They care about good weather, and that's because it's a generation that increasingly values time outdoors. They care about professional sports, a hub airport, a fun nightlife, and yes, the presence of other young people. And Charlotte's doing extremely well against those. And as my little bit of evidence, Sam and his buddies have taken 3 guide trips. And those 3 guide trips were to Austin, Nashville, and Charlotte. Just as a side note, I have yet to convince him to try Richmond. Now, Sam is going to get older and he's going to look for different things. Assuming people still have offices by then, he will care about his commute. And as somebody who gets stuck on I-95 trying to get from Richmond to DC, I can attest that a commute matters. Here, Charlotte ranks 4th, far better than the cities at the bottom, like Atlanta and DC. Sam is also going to care about cost of living, and housing, of course, is the biggest and most variable cost of all. And on this metric, Charlotte tops the list. This chart measures the percent of households who are burdened with housing costs disproportionate to their income. So it shows cost of living compared to income. And highest growth in wages and lowest cost of housing is a pretty nice combination. He may also care about crime, and that's probably a topic worth watching, particularly violent crime. Now, these are 2017 numbers and come with all sorts of caveats, but I just make the simple point that safety is a fundamental part of quality of life. But overall, on quality of life, Charlotte has a lot to offer. So it's not surprising that for the past few years, Charlotte has been ranking near the top of places where millennials are moving. Now we just need to work on Sam. Finally, let me talk about equality. This is a critical component. You can't claim victory unless the rising tide is lifting all boats. In Charlotte, the 2019 poverty rate was 11.7%. Now that's better than the country as a whole, but just about the middle of the pack in our sample. Another way to look at quality of life is life expectancy. And there, for those at the bottom income quartile at age 40, it's 79.3. That's in the bottom half of our cities and below the US average. And if you look at the neighborhood level, a more distressing picture emerges. I've seen data where the gap between certain neighborhoods in Charlotte is almost 20 years. And unfortunately, those disparities fall along race and education lines. Now, a key part of the puzzle is whether everybody in a community has the opportunity to move up the economic ladder. And Charlotte's, the numbers around economic mobility aren't going to be news to anyone here. Notoriously, Charlotte ranked last in the Raj Shetty 2014 study looking at economic mobility in the 50 largest cities. In the 12 regions of this list, this is a chart that shows economic mobility for children of low-income parents. So if your parents make $27,000, how much are your kids going to make? In Charlotte, those children actually lose ground. They make even less than their low-income parents, in contrast to most of these other cities. And I just want to make an uncomfortable point about race. The lowest mobility places on this list and in the Raj Shetty list are disproportionately from the Old South. And of course, all of the legacy issues are relevant as all of our cities try to tackle this issue. But just to illustrate its impact in Charlotte, Black children of parents who make $27,000 made 20% less, or $21,000. White children of parents with the same income made $32,000. And so underneath these numbers for a city, there's also some issues on race. I will say I've been impressed with how much is being done to try to address this issue. For example, I hear an awful lot about the investments going into affordable housing in Charlotte. Again, it comes back to where I started. One hard to measure asset that Charlotte has is business and civic leadership willing to roll up its sleeves and get to work. So what really matters here? Things like good workforce, good jobs, these are the foundation upon which you build. But you have to keep at it. You can't rest on your laurels. And that comes back to the important work that organizations like yours do in making sure leaders are rallying behind the right investments. Growth, of course, brings new challenges. In Atlanta, as you saw, the commutes have gotten extreme as affordable housing is ever further away. And debates over equity have erupted amidst an unsettling increase in the crime rate. On the other hand, your competitors continue to invest, and Atlanta's Beltline has brought a whole new in-town vibe that is quite attractive to some of the millennials we've talked about. But as you can tell, I've got a lot of faith in Charlotte and a real belief you'll keep making progress. And with that, I'll close. And Janet, I look forward to hearing reactions and questions.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that fantastic overview. We're always curious to know how Charlotte and the region stack up against our peers, and your remarks were spot on. I learned some new things, and I had even previewed your presentation, so thank you. We have a question from, let's see, it doesn't say who it's from, but question is wage growth in Charlotte due to some employers raising the minimum wage or due to other factors?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I mean, it's everything. But I think it's actually much more around the mix of jobs than it is the exact same jobs, making a little bit more money. You do hear competition for entry-level workers in Charlotte and otherwise. But particularly if you look over the last year, I don't think that's really the driver. I think it's business attraction. And then I really do think this business formation thing is a really interesting vibe that, as I was doing my research here, I wouldn't have known that. And a really interesting positive to what's happening in Charlotte. And, all those then end up with higher wages.
Yeah, it is well known that the majority of job growth comes from existing industry and companies, already in your backyard versus those new companies that might be coming in. But I too was pleasantly surprised to see Charlotte on top there when it comes to new starts. A question about opportunity employment. You mentioned that sub-back, in terms of folks with that level of education, but by the Fed's definition, we follow the Brookings Opportunities Industries definition over here at the Alliance, but by the Fed's definition, does that also include benefits and other career pathways?
Well, I'm going to punt on that question because I'm not going to be able to get the definition perfect. I believe it is comp, not benefits, and I believe it is about just the availability of jobs. They don't talk about next job and whatever. And, I do think it's a fair criticism of somebody, working as a truck driver to ask the question of what's the career pathway. Right. But honestly, I think the bigger point is, you want an economy that works for all. Right. And we do know all of the benefits that come with college degrees, and they're great. And I made that point at the beginning. But I think, if you've got an economy that's all about the college degree people and it doesn't include opportunities for the people without, I don't think you're going to be happy about your economy.
Yeah, that's true. And I think from an economic development and a business recruitment standpoint, that's certainly an area of focus that we want to make sure we're trying to target and pinpoint is, looking at industries and looking at sectors, projects that provide those career pathways. And so, putting a little bit more attention and focus on those that, don't require necessarily a bachelor's degree, do provide some level of benefits. And then, if the employers can articulate what those career pathways to mobility are, those are certainly the ones, the jobs that we want to go after. Another question for you here, Tom, is can you elaborate on your term collective hustle?
Let me put it this way. There are a lot of temptations for people in business organizations to do what is being asked by their boards and their shareholders, which is, quite often about, selling more stuff at a higher price and reducing costs and making more money. I think it is rare, but it's notable when you see a group of business leaders who decide that an important part of what they're trying to do is to build their town. And, that isn't something that stays with you forever. A lot of businesses go global. They've got lots of distractions. The biggest businesses often, if I were to think about Atlanta in the 60s, Coca-Cola was everything. Today, Coca-Cola is not actually visibly active in the Atlanta sphere because they've got global things to think about. But I just think one of the things that's really impressive about Charlotte is how the business community, all of them, including the very biggest ones, are intimately involved with trying to build Charlotte. It's not the only city like that. I'd say Minneapolis is like that too, just to pick on another one. But when you can get the array of business leaders really powerfully focused on their city, I think that really does matter. And then, of course, you've got to work hard to deliver. And that's the hustle. The collective part is the first, and the hustle part is really working hard. And there's something, as I said at the beginning, I get to visit all of these towns, and a lot of places tell, I walk in, they go, let me tell you how great we are. But the places with the hustle walk in and say, what do you think? What do we need to do differently? What are you seeing in other places? How can we get better? That is, I think, a big part of the spirit of Charlotte, and also, Janet, obviously what your organization does.
Yeah, thank you for that. I do want to acknowledge for everybody else in the audience who might have missed that Tom was crediting us with having that collective hustle here. And I know just in my short time of almost 2 years here, I have witnessed that firsthand. And I think your slide that had the array of, the headlines of how much hustling we're doing in order to lift this community up made me proud. So thank you for acknowledging that. Another question for you here, Tom. Is there a comparison between graduation rates and the income inequality for those young people whose parents are among the lowest earners and who are expected to earn less than their parents?
So I haven't run that analysis on this data. And so I want to, so first of all, high school graduation rates are actually very difficult to kind of parse in the analytics, because different school systems have different standards. And unfortunately, there are a set of school systems, in this country that focus on graduation rates, but don't focus on graduates, right? And so what does seem to be highly correlated is college graduation rates. And so the BA, that absolutely does seem to matter. And you can look at it any way you want. As I said, health, wealth, resilience to a downturn, incomes, all of those things relate to a college degree. As I've gotten into it, it's a little harder with the high school degree, just because they're very, very different standards by school district.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that one, Tom. Wearing your old hat from Atlanta, you noted your chamber chair hat there. What can Charlotte learn from Atlanta's expansion, and how can we avoid the issues that they now have with commute times?
Well, Atlanta is, I think the phrase is, it's the largest, I think it is actually a top 5 largest city in the world, because there are no boundaries. It just grows out and out and out. I think there's something really awesome going on in Atlanta right now around the Beltline. And I mentioned that at the very end, but it seemed like a pretty simple idea when it was put forward 15 or 20 years ago, which was let's pave this old railroad track. But what's happened is became a locus for in-town living of somewhat higher density. And so a bunch of people who actually like the idea of living in a city have rallied around the fact that they have a place to walk or bike or, walk their dog. And it's really brought a vibe that I think is extraordinary. So, I think investing in-town development and in-town amenity is one way to do it. I'd say I think in the context of a more hybrid work environment, though, where more and more people may choose to live an hour outside because they only come in a couple of days a year, I think every city like Charlotte and Atlanta is at risk of this burgeoning distance thing, because people do like to have a house and a place they can live, and a yard, and affordability sometimes means that has to go out. So I think it's a real challenge to prevent it. I'm, thinking of, driving in on 77 or something one day. I mean, it's not easy to prevent it, I don't think. And I don't think it's as simple as public transit, because in the places that don't have public transit, creating the entire grid, trying to make this like Boston or something, I just think it's too hard.
Yeah.
So, I don't have any great answers. I think it is one of the real challenges, but I think you got to bring people in, bring jobs in. That's part of the key.
That's right. Yeah, it's more holistic than that. And so when we talk about economic development here at the Alliance, we talk about it in that comprehensive approach of not just the business attraction, but also the workforce development, the investments in transportation infrastructure, the need to innovate, foreign direct investment. I mean, all of that really is important in a holistic approach to how we grow and develop a more equitable economy. And speaking of international, and you might not have this at your fingertips, Tom, but the question is, how does Charlotte stack up to other cities with international diversity?
I don't have an analytic answer to that. I'm in Greenville today, and I can tell you Greenville beats every city in my district in terms of international diversity.
Really?
BMW's here, Michelin's here.
Sure.
They have language schools in almost every language. So I don't think it's at the top, but I don't have enough information to know. I think a lot of it comes with, recruiting of international businesses. One of the interesting things about Charlotte's recruitment of businesses, I think, is so much has come from people who already know Charlotte, people who then went to run other businesses and move them to Charlotte. I think I would guess it's probably less, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah, well, I would be, again, remiss if I didn't put in a plug for the fact that we do have more than 1,000 foreign direct investment companies who have been operating here. And as you said, a lot of it's word of mouth. We've experienced that certainly within manufacturing with the German companies that, that referral activity and the fact that one is gone, the follow-on that we see from that has been really, we've been really successful in it. But team, note that we want to follow back up with this group on how we stack up against our peers, because I think that's a good follow-on for us. Okay, we have just a few more minutes and a couple more questions, so we'll try to plow through these, Tom. Let's see. How do cities balance growth and stay focused on keeping or creating affordable housing near their city centers for access to all and lessened displacement?
Yeah, well, as I said in the chart at the end, I often credit Charlotte with getting ahead of this. So I don't know that I have any lessons for Charlotte. It's a problem everywhere. I want to put out affordable housing. There are two types of problems. There's access and there's displacement. On displacement, which is you've been living in your affordable house and the values go up and therefore taxes go up. I think there are places that have solved that problem just through tax structure. Florida is a place that only changes your real estate tax when you sell your house. So I'm not suggesting tax changes, but I do think that is a solvable problem that one can do directly. The harder problem, I think, is access. And obviously market forces work. So places get more attractive, developers come in, they build more stuff, that stuff's more expensive. That means the people who used to have access to that stuff need to live somewhere else. The folks that seem to make a difference there make it with money. It's a math problem. And whether it's philanthropic money and corporate money, as often been dedicated here in Charlotte, it's state or local money, or it's federal money. You have to find some way to change the math on the affordable housing. You can do it through subsidies. You've obviously got a whole voucher program. You can do it through zoning, right, which is another way of using the math. But I think if you're going to take a real commitment to affordable housing, you have to accept the fact that the reason you don't have it isn't anything other than the market is taking you in a different direction. And so you've got to then commit whatever amount of land or subsidy or zoning or vouchers or funding changes the economic equation to make it affordable. And then you've got to do it in a way that you don't have the New York problem, which is a bunch of rent-controlled apartments that are inhabited by wealthy people.
Yeah, right. Very mindful of that. And we're policy, and again, I think public-private partnership conversations can affect the outcomes here. Okay, we've got so many questions, but I'm really gonna try to cherry pick some of these. You mentioned the Raj Chetty study. We have an effort that rose out of that, with Charlotte coming in 50th out of 50. Leading on Opportunities has kind of been our playbook for how we ensure, again, that we're being inclusive and lifting up some of our more underserved communities and populations. But are there other metrics, Tom, as you compare Charlotte to other markets, where if they are doing better, there's something that we should look to from how they've done it better? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, I'll take it maybe in a different direction, which is, I read the Raj Chetty. When I took the job, I heard about some of the stuff Charlotte was doing. So I read the Raj Chetty study, and then I looked at the cities on the list, and people don't talk about it much. Number 48 is Raleigh, number 49 is Atlanta, number 50 is Charlotte. If you look at my list, who's at the bottom? It's Jacksonville, it's Nashville. These are all southern cities. They all had the exact same set of issues. And I just want to come back to education. I grew up in Tampa. I went to the only desegregated public school pre-1967, but I was around when Tampa was fully desegregated. I was in second grade. And in second grade, let me tell you, a bunch of kids showed up in our school who had not been prepared for second grade, right? That was a whole generation of people who were in a separate and not equal school system. And then most of the South reacted in ways that didn't catch those kids up, right? There was, whatever combination of redistricting, white flight, underinvestment in city public schools. And so you've got a generation that started behind and their kids are still behind. And I did come out with what's really the biggest thing that makes people go through economic mobility. I really do think it's education. And so that's where we focus our efforts. I focus my efforts because I think it's very clear that if you can get people educated, you can get people mobile and economically mobile. And again, I just think there's a legacy that I don't pin on Charlotte. It's true of every city in the South, but it is a real legacy issue. And then, if I could just be really tactical, the Charlotte superintendent, who I thought was very impressive, was on our district dialogues thing a couple of weeks ago with a professor from Northwestern. We were talking about this issue of what's happened this year with kids remote and falling behind. And the people falling behind the most are those who are the least well off. And the professor from Northwestern said, and it kind of shocked me into focus, well, what are we going to do this summer about it? Mm-hmm. And the point he was making is, if education is the most important thing, and you've got a generation of kids who, for reasons not their fault, have been not educated remotely, why aren't we using this summer to do something about it? And I think the answer is it's politically brutal. But I mean, the Richmond public school chief is trying to do it, and I think he's ended up getting it for next summer. But we've got, if we're behind, why not invest in the kids right now?
Yeah, and close those gaps. Again, going back to the collective hustle for, the greater good. Okay, I'm going to end on I think was a fun one. We're going to go back to Sam for a second here, Tom. So how can professional sports teams assist a region in the recruitment of millennials like your son?
Well, I hope that was Fred who asked that question.
Sure was.
No, I think it plays a huge thing. I think there is something about the question of whether a city has arrived. And I think, whether it's the, basketball or football, I think there is absolutely something, there. And I can remember I was working on a project in Charlotte in the late 80s, and I went to, was it the Knights, the AAA team? Might still be.
That's right.
And I went to a Hornets game, the same weekend, and the vibe was incredibly great at the Hornets thing. And it was also good at the Knights, but one's AAA and one's the NBA. And so I just think there's something great about it. And there's a virtuous circle. People are looking for a city that's cool. It's got a set of experiences. Among those experiences, I just picked professional sports because Sam really cares about it. There are other people who care about parks, but he really cares about professional sports. And I think you can get the thing flowing when you've got these entertainment venues. And as I go to other cities in our district, one of the biggest issues people have is, I wouldn't have my kid come back here. And you hear that in a lot of cities, smaller, mid-sized towns in our district, because the kids are going to Washington, D.C., or the kids are going to New York or Boston. And where else they're going is Charlotte. And that was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and we were very proud as a community broadly that we got the shout out on Saturday Night Live with our Hornets and LaMelo Ball and us being the gateway to Gastonia. So we take great pride in that type of promotion for us unsolicited. Well, Tom, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to see you and spend time with you. We really appreciate the insights that you've shared with our audience this morning virtually. We're now going to ask your colleague, Laura Ulrich, who is the regional economist for the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond and an executive committee member of the Alliance, and who leads our regional research collaborative here, to lead us in some polling. So thanks again, Tom.
Thank you, Janet, and thanks everybody.
Thanks, Tom, so much for sharing your insights. I'm always thrilled when you join us here in the Charlotte region. We're now going to move on to some polling. So we're going to do this throughout the day, and this will be the first shot at it. So directions for the poll are on your screen, I believe, or will be in just a second. You can also find the polling at the bottom of your of the Zoom link there, or the Zoom presentation. Please note you're only able to join the poll from a browser and not from a mobile device. So if you're on a mobile device, if you want to participate in the polling, you'll have to switch to a browser. So if you'll click on the link in the chat to join the poll, we can get that started now. So it's in the chat. And you'll see the first question is actually a ranking question. And so any questions that ask you to order a rank, you must click and rank up with the up and down arrows. So I'll give everybody a few minutes to get into the poll and start ranking.
Hello, everyone. This is Katie. Give me 1 second. We'll have the poll active in just 1 moment.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the poll is, it's not asking the questions that they want it to, so they'll have it active in just a second. All right, so it looks like it's in there now. So if you'll go ahead and click into the poll, you can rank these from the element you think is most important for regional competitiveness to least important. And to rank, you click on it and then press the up and down arrows. I think as people begin to answer, we'll see it come up on the screen. Yep, here we go. All right, so far, workforce and talent's clear first place there. And tax rates coming in at the end. That's interesting. All right, so a lot of the things that are at the top are things we're going to be talking about today. So this is great.
Hey, Laura, it's Janet just jumping in. I'm actually surprised, given what Tom just said around early childhood education, that one isn't ranking.
Yeah, I am too. I was just thinking the same thing. I was waiting to see kind of how they were coming out, and to see that higher education is a much much higher there than early childhood is interesting.
Yeah, and maybe it's around how it's phrased around regional competitiveness versus economic mobility, but.
Right. Well, and oftentimes when people are looking at where to locate, they are asking more questions about how many people are you graduating in certain fields compared to maybe some of the early childhood statistics.
That's right. That has certainly been our experience.
Yeah. But business creation really high too. So that's, I think that's interesting as well. And the concept of creating local businesses and then growing them within, I know that'll come up several times today as well. All right, so the next one asks, what 3 sectors do you think? So this is one where there is a right answer, but so the question is, which 3 sectors do you think contribute most to the Charlotte region's GDP? Yeah, so healthcare, financial services, and transportation and logistics. I'm gonna wait for a second for the answers to come in so I can tell you which one is right. All right, so it looks like most of the answers are in now, and we stumped you on this one. So the correct answer is actually financial services, manufacturing, and real estate. I think one of the things people don't necessarily realize is how much manufacturing there is in the region. So the region part of that is kind of key as well. But it is, the answer there is the first one, financial services, manufacturing, and real estate. And then this next one, what do you consider the most important elements in the Charlotte region's economic revitalization? And so rank these in order from most important to least important. All right, so the hub airport is coming in first place. I know myself personally, I've lived in the region now for 13 years, and I can't tell you how many times I've told people that the Charlotte airport is a huge part of why I've stayed here, because it is so convenient, and it's so nice to be able to get wherever I want or need to go quickly. And millennials moving in is second, which I think is really interesting, and something that Charlotte is certainly known for doing well with. But professional sport teams coming in last. So I know we talked about that a lot with Tom, but and for some people, like Tom mentioned, for some people, and I know for my own children, it will be a big draw. That's a huge draw, and for others, maybe they're not as into sports, but those, all the sports teams, and certainly the MLS team coming on next year is exciting for the Charlotte area. All right, so I think we have one more question. And this one focuses on the region's biggest challenge. So what do you think is the region's biggest challenge when it comes to economic revitalization? Economic mobility, crime rates, affordable housing, or infrastructure? You know, I think these results point out that we do have multiple challenges we need to address. There's a lot of positives to talk about, but there are challenges as well. And economic mobility is certainly something that gets talked about a lot in Charlotte due to the Chetty study, but also because of other data that are available out there. So I'm not surprised to see that one rise to the forefront, but clearly a lot of folks also think that we have, you know, significant issues with infrastructure and housing affordability as we move forward. So this is all great information. We really appreciate you participating in the polls, and we'll continue to do this throughout the day. Now I'd also like to welcome Hunter Schull from Wells Fargo to join me to connect the dots a bit.
Great. Well, thank you, Laura. And Tom, thank you for the great remarks. I thought that was a very interesting segment. And I really want to thank the audience for their participation and the engagement in that polling. I think that's a neat way to get some real-time feedback, and we do appreciate that. One of the things that we thought about talking a bit about is the part of the agenda around revitalization. And, you know, I think about one of the slides that came out in the poll question that Tom talked about around quality of life, and one of the poll questions, you know, and some of that does come back to some of the strengths that Charlotte has and the region has. And I think that anchoring ourselves on those strengths, and you think about the airport, you think about our geographic location, the business environment, workforce availability, education, all of those are strengths that we need to continue to build on. And then I think we talked a little bit about areas of needed focus, investment around transportation, economic mobility. And so that will be very, very key for the region as we think about future success and continuing what we have. Where does the Business Alliance help here, and what role can we play? And one of the things that we wanted to make sure we amplify now is that we're going to try to work on our visibility even more than we already have through marketing campaigns with a targeted approach. We're going to continue to do what we can to invest and support the companies in the region. Those of you that are here in our backyard, so important to continue to be a resource for you. And then the net import of jobs and people that have created growth and will continue to be such an important aspect of how we think about the future, identifying targets and being very disciplined and deliberate around how we help to support the region will be really, really important. And so wanted just to touch on a couple of those things, Laura. Excited to be a part of this today, and thanks to everyone for being here.
Yeah, I thought a lot of what Tom said, and then also seeing the poll results really resonated with me as an economist and also as a resident of the region. And I think Charlotte has so much to be excited about, and Tom brought out many of those things, but we also do have some challenges. And I think that even as we kind of begin to emerge, I think all of us are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel now with COVID. Still, as I look at the Zoom pictures today, it looks like many of you, like me, are still at home. Things aren't back to normal yet. And so we do have to think about how we rebuild the economy. The reality is that we still have about 8.5 million Americans that don't have the jobs they had a year ago, and about over 18 million Americans are still relying on some form of unemployment insurance. So we're not back to where we were before COVID. And so I do think today, as we talk about where we sit in Charlotte and how we compare to these other places, we do have to keep an eye on how we make sure that we have inclusive growth that comes out of this revitalization that not only benefits just Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, but the entire region, because the region offers us a lot of opportunities. You know, we saw just a minute ago, you know, a lot of people didn't realize manufacturing was such a big contributor to the region. And a lot of that isn't in Mecklenburg County, right? It is in some of the other counties that the Alliance serves. So I think thinking of, you know, the entire region as we think about how we emerge out of COVID-19 and how we grow Charlotte is really going to be a key piece of the puzzle. So now we're gonna, I'm gonna invite Michelina Antahades to join me, and she is going to be our tour guide and take us on a virtual trip. Michelina is with the CRVA, and she's also an Alliance Executive Committee member and the Young Professional Board Chair. Michelina?
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Hunter. Good morning. I am Michelina Antahades with the Charlotte Regional Visitors Authority. I have the pleasure today of taking you on a brief trip to 2 different metros. As you can imagine, I'm bullish on the Charlotte region. All of us at the CRVA are committed to making our community the best that it can be for both visitors and residents alike. Hence why I'm with you now. First, we're going to Austin, Texas. Known for its t-shirt and bumper sticker slogan, "Keep Austin Weird," and it's marketed as the live music capital of the world. As we watch this video, make sure to watch out for infrastructure of all kinds, specifically bike lanes and general walkability. Check out the placemaking pieces, including parks, waterways, and public spaces. Also, we all know the arts, entertainment, and culinary elements attract talent, specifically millennials. All of these factors add to their quality of life. As you all know, Austin is known for tech talent as well. What you may not know is that it has attracted the likes of Oracle, SpaceX, and many others. According to Business Insider, and what many have called an exodus from the Bay Area, many tech workers are able to work remotely and pack up for more affordable locales. Miami and Austin have turned out to be 2 of the most popular relocation spots. Tech executives like Dropbox CEO Drew Houston have announced they're moving to Texas, and Tesla founder Elon Musk is building a new Cybertruck factory here. While you're watching, we want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts and hot topic callouts in the chat. What are things that stand out to you? And more specifically, if you have traveled here, what are some things that you appreciate the most about Austin? Please let us know. Okay, here's a short video of what it's like inside Texas's growth tech hub. One thing that you just finished watching was a reel of the list of businesses that have participated. The Austin Metro supports local business. It's local with a capital L, and we know everything's bigger in Texas. We know how important supporting and fostering small business growth is to our community as we drive sustainable growth. So Austin has a distinctive music scene and a unique sense of style that definitely plays into attracting top talent, specifically millennials. You saw in the video of Austin, walk and bikeability and access to adventure is attractive too. Our distinct neighborhoods here in the region have character, lush parks and greenways, cozy diners, world-class museums, lively breweries, and quirky boutiques. You'll find something a little different in all of them, and that's what makes the Charlotte region special. Working together as a region to collectively deliver these characteristics, attract and support business, and develop smart growth plans are key ingredients to success. Now let's go to the chat and see what stood out to you as you watched, and for those of you who've been to Austin, what you enjoyed in the Texas capital. So I'm scrolling through now. Lots of energy, keeping it vibrant, feels like a college town all over. It's casual, no suits, high energy, loving the diversity, the vibrancy, water elements, natural rivers and springs. vibrancy again. The bridge, love that. Embracing diversity, great neighborhood shopping, entertainment across the city. These are all awesome. I think these are all things that Austin have and we have and could even get more of. High energy, casual, yeah. The joy, just people being really authentic, a mix of young and old equals soul. I love that. Those are great comments. Thank you, and keep them coming. Now that we've seen the Austin community from a broad perspective, I would like to take you a little deeper into a specific development called the Innovation District. It's a one-of-a-kind downtown Austin neighborhood with the recent groundbreaking and goal to create an inclusive community where Austinites collaborate to create new models of health and economic growth for all. All right, let's roll our video on Austin's Innovation District.
The vision for Austin's Innovation District is an inclusive community where Austinites collaborate to create new models of health and economic growth for all.
In 2017, a consortium of organizations launched Capital City Innovation to collaboratively manage strategy, business development, and operations of Austin's Innovation District.
It is a coordinated effort to recruit, support, and build enterprises that will make Central Texas an international hub for health innovation.
The heart of Austin's Innovation District is a 14-acre downtown property, the site of Central Health's former Brackenridge Hospital.
Austin's Innovation District is emerging in a new downtown neighborhood, one that is anchored by the new Dell Medical School at the University of Texas at Austin and the Dell Seton Medical Center.
Today, Capital City Innovation's Affinity Network aggregates 6 business incubators supporting health and life science startups across Central Texas.
Austin's Innovation District will support their next stage of growth and be a soft landing site. The district leverages Austin's existing strengths in technology and combines them with growing capabilities in health and life sciences.
We're excited to launch the flagship development for the Innovation District, the 17-story building with mission-aligned organizations open to the community, really representing the best that Austin has to offer.
By 2029, the Innovation District's downtown campus will be a vibrant, multi-building, mixed-use development intensively programmed to promote collaboration. We project it will produce more than 12,000 new jobs, over $2.5 billion in annual economic output for the region, and will be a powerful framework for collaboration among our universities, companies, and community.
As you saw here in the video, partnerships and collaboration are the overarching themes. Carol, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you be willing to give us a preview of what may be coming to Charlotte?
Well, Michelina, I'd love to. Let me give you maybe just a few things on top of my mind after watching that video, maybe just a quick sneak peek. But you will have to sort of let your mind wander a little bit on this one. So if you remember in that video, seeing the beautiful image of the new Dell Medical School and how gorgeous that was, but that will give you a little bit of an idea of what we'll be seeing in Charlotte. Because when Atrium and Wake Forest Baptist Health and Wake Forest School of Medicine come together to bring a second school of medicine, Wake Forest School of Medicine, to Charlotte, that gives you an idea of what we're going to do. And in fact, I just have to say, Michelina, the question we get most often is, where is this medical school going to be located? And that's actually going to be answered today in a press conference, probably actually, 9:51, within the hour or so. So that'll be out soon, and you'll all get to know that. But I think the most important thing is when you bring a 4-year school of medicine to a city, there have been study after study that's shown that it's a game changer for the whole region. And it's because it's a catalyst, as this video pointed out, for growth and for research and for innovation. So picture in your mind, as you saw some sketches of an innovation district here in Charlotte that we're calling an inclusive economic engine, because we absolutely believe that it'll be a job multiplier and a place to bring everybody together. And we want it to be a community asset in every sense of the word. So stay tuned for more updates. Sneak peek #1 today and a lot more coming. Thanks, Magdalena.
Oh, thanks, Carol. And how exciting that the press conference is today. We will all have to be sure to read about it later. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I can't wait until we can join again in person and even travel together to another destination to explore it. With Exploring Economies being virtual this year, it gives us an opportunity to explore not one, but 2 cities. So buckle in. We're going to take you more than 900 miles north to the Greater Plains of Texas to the mountains in Denver. Denver has a great outlook on regionalism and unity. The region is tied together by sports, innovation, and the love of the outdoors, and Forbes ranks it as #1 place to do business. During our tour of Denver, listen out for how many times they mention regional and what ties the different communities together. Look out for their mentions of transportation infrastructure and investment. Check out the geographic area it covers and take notes on the lifestyle piece. Again, I'd love to see in the chat the things that stand out to you and the things that our region can bring home. And if you've traveled here, what are some things that you appreciate most about Denver? Let's roll the video.
It's no surprise that people who live and work outside of Colorado have rather limited perceptions about Denver. Sunshine, outdoor recreation, perhaps our football team. And while these are important to life in the metro region, we're here to tell you there's more, so much more. Metro Denver is a region driven by the idea of possibility. The possibility there are better ways to work, to play, and to live. And Metro Denver is more than just the central business district. From Longmont to Littleton, Greeley to Golden, it's the 9 counties and 66 amazing communities, all contributing to the things you may already know about the region. And the things you didn't know. The Metro Denver EDC presents the Denver You Didn't Know. There's no question, Metro Denver has a robust economy. Take Denver International Airport. The Wall Street Journal recently named it the #1 airport in the country. But did you know it was designed for commerce and is not only larger than San Francisco's airport, but bigger than San Francisco itself? And when you rank first in private aerospace employment, why not shoot for the stars? United Launch Alliance has more than 1,200 rocket scientists and engineers reaching new heights in aerospace, not in Florida, Alabama, or Texas, but right here in Centennial. Many Fortune 500 companies call Metro Denver home. Startups too. In fact, we're well known as a great place for young companies to launch their fresh ideas. Metro Denver is rapidly expanding its mass transit system, increasing regional mobility and access. It's actually the largest build-out in the United States. But if a different mode of transportation is more your speed, Boulder ranks in the top 4 for bikeable cities. Colorado takes pride in having one of America's most educated workforces. And every year, more than 150,000 students are enrolled in our universities, prepared to start their careers. With everything happening here, it's no surprise Forbes calls Denver the #1 city to do business. But companies looking to relocate or expand should know life in our region is just as enticing as work. We offer a place employees can proudly put down roots and strive for a happy, healthy future. Amenities matter. Community matters. Lifestyle matters. Colorado is one of the very few places where you can ski and golf, all in the same day. But did you know golf balls fly 10% further at a mile above sea level? Leprino Foods is the world's largest mozzarella company, supplying giants like Domino's, Pizza Hut, and Papa John's. And here's a juicy tidbit. The cheeseburger was actually invented here on Spear Boulevard back in 1935. If music is your jam, check out the 250-million-year-old sound system. Our Center for Performing Arts is actually the 2nd largest in the country. And the beer industry is a big thing across our region, boasting more than 300 microbreweries, along with the Great American Beer Festival. Plus, sports fans. We have 7 professional teams, and more than 6 million people attend sporting events each year. Whether it's the business environment, innovations and ideas, the arts scene, schools, job opportunities, or our commitment to community, there's more to Metro Denver than meets the eye. U.S. News & World Report said we're one of the best places to live in the U.S., not to mention the top economy for the past 3 years. It just doesn't get any better than that. Metro Denver is one region you'll be glad you got to know and call home.
And on this overcast day here, that made me want to go get outside and take a visit back to Denver. I grew up camping and hiking all over Colorado with my dad, but I haven't seen those Rockies in more than a few years. And seeing this video, the transformation is incredible. I would like to go back soon. So I heard a lot of things here: amenities, community, lifestyle matters in this place to those people. They're rapidly expanding the mass transit system, increasing its mobility and access. And the system benefits more than 3 million people with over 2,000 square miles in all or part of the 8 counties. Wow. The Alliance knows the importance of fostering the development across the business ecosystem, from Fortune 500 companies to startups and entrepreneurs. And in partnership with the CRVA's tourism efforts, together, we are completing nationwide to bring economic development advancements to our region. From adventure at the U.S. National Whitewater Center to professional sports, including the longest race in NASCAR, the annual Coca-Cola 600, to shopping at fun thrift stores or high-end boutiques, we have a lifestyle that truly has a fit for everyone. Everybody has a place here. Oh, and we can get to the beach in under 4 hours flat. I don't think they have that in Denver. Let's see what stood out to each of you in the chat. A lot of the outdoors, return to nature, the transportation, nature again, the quality of living, kind of that live, work, and play feel, all the natural amenities, the music scene, appealing to families, good talent pool, healthy lifestyle with outdoor activities, the light rail or metro in the region, having that regional approach. I think these are things that we are striving to emulate here and things that are on the forefront of all of our minds in Charlotte and in our region. Both the Alliance and the CRVA explore our peer metros around the country to discover best practices and use this information in planning for the future to strengthen the unique qualities of our region. Personally, I believe that our region is the best in the nation, and virtually touring Austin and Denver was really fun. I learned a lot, and I hope that you enjoyed it too. But we all know Charlotte is what's now and what's next. We are also well positioned to continue sustainable, regional, and equitable growth. I hope that those things translated to you and were brought to mind as you're watching all those videos. For those reasons and more, I am proud to call this region and this place my home. Thank you for listening in. We look forward to visiting these cities in person soon, but hopefully you enjoyed the brief virtual visits today. And now I would like to turn it back to Janet Labar to keep us moving through our program. But before we do, you will see some comparison facts pop up on your screen.
Great. Thank you so much, McLena. We are so proud to partner with CRVA, and we truly are lucky to have you leading our young professionals group. And I don't know about y'all, but all this music is making me want us to get back to some of the live music venues and just be together again. So This morning we heard President Barkin talk about commute times in relationship to how metros and communities win. We also saw Denver's bike pathways and a light rail system, noting their downtown to suburbs in a flash. And with our population here projected to reach 4.6 million by 2050, we know that infrastructure is going to play a critical role to how we manage growth that's connected and inclusive and sustainable. We also know from our conversations with many of you out there that existing employers and site selection consultants that we work with, regions and metros that are investing in infrastructure that's equitable sends a positive signal to businesses that we are ahead of it and we're planning for smart growth. And that is why the Alliance has a focus on the Coalition for a Better 2050 and transforming the Charlotte region through investments in innovation, as we heard Carol tease out, higher education, and of course, infrastructure. So now I'm excited to chat with two of our peer markets that understand significance of investing in transportation infrastructure, and we're hopeful to glean some lessons from their success and their failure. But before I introduce Ralph and Wade, just remember, we've got some Q&A time, although we're a little bit behind schedule. So think about those questions. Please direct them via chat to Ashley Hedrick, and we'll have time for maybe 2 questions. We'll see how it goes. So let me introduce Wade Cooper now. He is managing partner of Jackson Walker Law Firm, and he chairs the Capital Metro Board, which is Austin's regional public transportation provider. Wade is joining us with a unique perspective of a failed and then successfully passed $7 billion transit plan. And joining Wade is Ralph Schultz, President and CEO of the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, one of Middle Tennessee's oldest and largest business federations. That chamber was founded in 1847, which, fun fact, beats Charlotte by 29 years. The Charlotte Regional Business Alliance can trace our origins back to the late 1800s, when Charlotte's first Board of Trade was established in 1876. So thank you, Wade and Ralph, for joining us this morning. We're going to jump right in. It's good to see y'all again. Okay, my first question is for Wade. So until recently, Austin didn't get much traction with transit. We know that there was a failed referendum in 2014, and then another proposal in 2000 that was also narrowly defeated. In that time span, it looks like light rail transitioned to urban rail, and the route went from a much denser area to taking away fewer existing car lanes. So Wade, can you give us a high-level overview of that 2014 failed referendum?
Sure, and thanks for having me. Glad to be here, glad to share some of our experiences with you. Don't know who it was that was dissing our football team in the chat box, but we'll have to talk later. But in 2014, we had a plan, and the first thing I'll say, the process to develop that plan was pretty much a top-down. A committee appointed, focused on it, and came up with a plan, if you're familiar with Austin, that came from the airport into downtown and went on, and this is sort of significant, the east side of our capital. Those of you who've been here know we have a lake, and then the Central Business District, and then above that, the Capitol Complex, and above that, the university. So there's sort of a block up the middle of our core, and you can, from a transportation standpoint, go to the east or go to the west. Well, this plan was sort of designed to attract development rather than go to where population was. Most of the student housing is on the west side of the university. And so the plan was developed, I think, in kind of a narrow top-down fashion. It was one route. It wasn't really a system. It really, and at the end of the day, the voters who were close to the route voted for it, and those who were not close to the route voted against it. Importantly as well, we divided the rail advocates because many of the rail advocates felt that the route was improper. It should have gone to where population is, not where we wanted to draw population. And so that proposal failed by about 14 percentage points in 2014. So there were lessons learned from that, and we'll talk about those in a little bit, I guess.
That's great, Wade. Thank you. And we will. Ralph, shifting over to you. A few years ago, Let's Move Nashville was positioned as the boldest municipal transit plan with a price tag of just under $9 billion. So do the same and give us some highlights of that referendum and a general scope of that plan, please. Oh, and you're muted, Ralph. Let's make sure we get you off mute. It's always one.
That happened really early in the day. I'm really glad. I won't do that again. Hey, great to be with you guys. Great to be a part of your tours there. I feel like I've been on this this study mission with you guys as well. You know, the proposal in Nashville was really a proposal to create a core for a regional system. It was big. It was bold. It was depending on who you listen to in the campaign, it could have been a $5 billion plan, or it could have been an $11 billion plan. It was just big and established a core. It was really the product. If you look back at the history on transit in Nashville, the previous mayor had tried a demonstration project, which did not pass. It failed. It was not a referendum. It just never went anywhere. And so lessons learned on that demonstration undertaking, the project wasn't big enough. So the next mayor went really big, and it would have established basically 5 lines of travel out of the center of the Nashville region. A lot of that was rail, which was brand new to Nashville. Some of it would have been BRT, bus rapid transit as well. And the 3 years of prep work that had been done was showing promise as we were polling the community. We saw positive response. In fact, we were seeing that we kind of started the process with a community support in the absence of a plan having been presented to the community. Even after the plan was presented to the community, that popularity grew and then sort of stalled. And then, you know, we had an unfortunate circumstance where where our mayor became involved in a relationship that was inappropriate in the eyes of Nashville, and after that, the support dwindled. Let me just mention really quickly, though, because this is the foundation of what we hope will be our next successful campaign. There are 6 items that we found as we studied 25 cities that were key to success, and on most of those items, we had great success, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But those 6 items are that the political will needs to exist. A conversation about transit and transportation needs to exist for years in advance of the referendum undertaking. A coalition needs to be formed that has broad reach and diverse reach into the community. Fundraising has to be ready to fund a paid campaign. And then we had to have a lobbying structure at the state level and the local level, because there was enabling legislation required at the state level and authorization required at the metro level. Maybe later in this conversation, I can tell you a little bit about the lessons learned in each of those categories. I'll close these comments by fundamentally saying that the referendum we undertook would tolerate no margin for error, and their error occurred, and we weren't in a position to be agile and responsive to that challenge.
Yeah, and Ralph, I think that's fair, and those are unusual circumstances, and how do you prepare for something like that? But still, lessons we're looking forward to diving deeper on those 6 that you just mentioned. Wade, coming back to you, let's focus on Prop A, which passed, gosh, what, 5 months ago-ish? Congratulations, very excited for Austin. Also, we're going to compete with you. So tell us about those main ingredients in achieving success of this plan compared to the previous 2. And just, tell us what was different this time around.
Yeah, well, we came out of the 2014. That was when I had just joined the board. And so we spent a lot of the next several years trying to sort out what we needed to do differently. And I'll comment really on 3 main areas. One was our takeaway was our plan needed to be bigger and bolder. It needed to be viewed as something that would really move the needle. And so our plan was bigger and bolder. We went from roughly $1 billion plan to a $7 billion plan. And so the highlights were, of course, 2 big rail lines and being really bold, a tunnel through downtown. And we wondered whether that would capture people's imagination or repel them. And I think people came to the conclusion that this is finally something that will solve our traffic problems, or at least make a meaningful dent in it. And it wasn't just rail. We had BRT, we had electrification of our bus fleets. We've been dealing with pickup zones using sort of Uber-like technology in some of the areas that are hard to serve with buses. And so the plan was bigger, bolder, more robust. We did a much better job, I think, of ensuring that all elements of the community felt like they had a stake in the plan. And so we tried to do, where we couldn't do rail, bus rapid transit or some enhancement, we did park and rides. So there was something that each part of our community could look to. The second thing I'll say is our process was a whole lot better. We really focused on outreach to the community. We learned from LA. LA is another good model to go talk about how they failed and how they won. And they went from a very top-up plan to a very bottom-up regional plan. And I don't think we achieved their level of success in terms of developing a bottom-up plan. But we had, I think, 9 joint meetings of our Cap Metro board along with the city council over several months. And so the community could see collaboration, which they weren't used to seeing. In the 2014 election, we also had the misfortune of having our first ever single member district elections. And so opposition became a rallying cry for some of the candidates. That didn't happen in 2020. We had a unanimous council backed by most all of the business organizations, including the chamber. And there's a little footnote that we can come back to, but we achieved across the community, I think, consensus that this was a good plan. There wasn't consensus on paying higher taxes, of course. And we had, at the same time, our city council had changed the ordinance on public camping. And so we got a little bit of an uproar during that campaign, decreased credibility of our city council. They also had in reaction to the George Floyd killing, canceled some training classes for our police academy. And so within the business district, that became a little bit of a problem in terms of credibility of the mayor and city council. But generally speaking, there was pretty broad consensus around the design of the plan. And I think, and then the most important thing was we saw a huge influx in the last several years of 20 to 29-year-old voters. And whereas the 2014 election had been a congressional election year, Austin, of course, is a blue dot in the middle of a very red state. And this election was one that was calculated to get the voters who would support our plan out. And we saw that, and that was something we were scurrying to be able to take advantage of. So that probably turned out to be as important as anything.
Yeah, so interesting how the stars align, right? I want to come back just really quickly to something that you said. You know, you talked about getting kind of all elements of the community involved, and I was just curious if that was from a, you know, diversity of the people, or if that was diversity of the geography in the region. Just trying to understand there, you know, as you approach this and kind of built the support, was it just pockets of populations or geography?
Yeah, I think, well, remember too, we're doing this in the middle of COVID. And so our group did a really good job of pivoting from in-person meetings to Zoom meetings. And we were trying to touch all the bases. Regionally, we had all 10 city council members. And so that was helpful to us supporting the campaign. But we were trying to be very sure that we touched each element of the community, both geographically, because there are very big geographic differences, as well as sort of demographically.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that, Wade. Okay, Ralph, So here, as I've shared with you in Charlotte region and across the Carolinas, there's a lot of transportation planning occurring. For example, the city of Charlotte is working on a transformation mobility network. Central Lina, one of our regional councils, which serves a 9-county area, is leading the region's first bi-state transit system planning process. And we know that timing is crucial. You mentioned 3 years. We know that's important when you're planning to put something that's this impactful in front of voters, and more generally just in socializing it in the community. But can you give us a little bit more insight onto Nashville's timeline for educating the public?
Well, one of the things we saw in other cities was it was important for the kind of the socialization of the idea of transportation and transit. One of the things we knew was that the need for a mass transit system in the region was generally accepted by almost everyone in the population. But the idea of creating a plan and the different possibilities for building that transportation system needed socialization. So a lot of that 3 years was spent having gathered a group, again, diverse in its character, to come together on a regular basis to explore some of the issues about installing a transit plan. That's where moving forward, that group that the chamber sponsored really played a role. And then the second element was creating that coalition of those broad and diverse organizations that could begin to carry those messages out into the community. I think in the end, you know, that phase of the undertaking was done pretty well. You know, as you've probably seen, and we did a 50-page after-action report that has not been published, but we have been happy to share with you guys and others. It was really the critical decisions that led to the defeat, other than the loss of trust in the mayor, was the fact that from a timing perspective, we put a lot of work into the prep, but we had a very compressed timeline from the declaration of a referendum to a vote. And there were a number of critical features in that year between the declaration and the vote that got short-circuited because the time was so compressed. Our Metro Council was uninvolved in the planning. Wade made a great comment, I thought, and it's something that we've devoted ourselves to as we prep for the next referendum. It's very much a top-down kind of plan development as compared to a bottom-up plan development. So we're working really hard right now with the authorities to build that grassroots belief in a plan so that we're not as reliant on a top-down leadership. One last thing on that, one of the most essential, Janet, as you know from our conversation, one of the most important things that we learned in that whole process was that we can't rely on the singular leadership of the mayor to move a project of that size. It has to be a broader leadership group.
Absolutely. And we're going to stay with you, Ralph, for a second here. As you've already hinted, you know, y'all did a 50-page in-depth analysis of why that referendum wasn't successful, even though I know, and just speaking with you prior to this, you had everything locked down. And so, you know, there was a great plan, but you've also done an extensive postmortem. So of those, you know, 6 key lessons, you know, walk us through just maybe some of the highlights and what those key takeaways are as, again, you're planning for, you know, the next few years.
I think the first key takeaway was trust was the issue. When we had the trust of the voting public, we could see success. Our last poll prior to the mayor acknowledging her relationship had us up 53 to 46 in the polls. And immediately after that, every base support demographic flipped and resulted in a 35 or 65% opposed perspective. So trust was absolutely key. The second thing I think we learned was we went big, but we didn't give ourselves the time to sell big. We didn't give ourselves the opportunity. We hadn't prepped the ground well enough for something of that magnitude. And then I think, thirdly, the timing of the election was something that we miscalculated. The turnout in the election ended up being double what the model said. And with trust as an issue, what that meant was that all the people that were, or most of the people that were on the fence, call them doubters, people that weren't sure if the transit plan made sense or not, when they lost trust in the process, they came out in droves and voted against. And so what was, a 60,000 voter turnout ended up being 125,000 turnout, and all of those voters voted no because they were unsure of the benefit, but they were really concerned about the negative effect of the expenditure. I hope that answered your question. It's tough to 50 pages and put it into
and distill it. Well, I know that is super confidential, but I just want to applaud the work that you and your team and the broader community have done to really look at that and learn from it. So Wade, coming back over to you, you talked about the audience and kind of the alignment of the supporters who really helped push forward those initiatives. Ralph just talked about, top down versus grassroots. But who was in your work with the Willing Coalition, and help us understand what their role was in contributing to the success of that narrative?
Well, we tried to make it very broad in the beginning, first on the political front, and then within the community. There was a Transit for Austin group that formed up and then eventually funded an educational campaign. And they were creating alliances and outreach to all the various organizations around town that we thought would mobilize in favor of it. And that, I think, was one of the keys to success. They were very good about reaching out to grassroots organizations of all different characteristics, students, different chambers of commerce, different neighborhood associations. And I think that early on helped us build credibility across the community along with our own outreach efforts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's certainly something that we are eyeballing here, as we think about, again, socializing the concept of a transformational mobility network, and knowing, that there's a lot of supporters out there, and we want to make sure that, again, we're working with the willing. So Ralph, as a chamber leader, I know you have the responsibility of generating the business community support on transportation and other initiatives that will essentially transform your market's competitiveness. But talk to us about the companies in the Nashville area. How do they support it? Is there anything you would have done differently as, again, y'all are looking forward here?
Well, when you look at our purpose statement as an organization, we create economic prosperity by facilitating community leadership. So our chamber is a process organization driven by our leadership. So the first important thing was that they gave us the license to do the work on the front end, to make the expenditures and build the support, do the investigation, et cetera. When it came time to drive the work, they were very open. Individual companies and the companies as a group are very willing to step up and say, this is a feature we need in our community for our employees and for our businesses to succeed. And then lastly, they were willing to fund the campaign. The campaign originally had a price tag of $1.8 million. We raised $3.1 million. Most of that came from the business community. In fact, virtually all of it came from the business community. And by the way, that's one of the lessons learned. The next time we will also be focused on small contributors and community and citizen contribution as well.
Right.
But the business community could not have done anything more. But what was integral to that process was that throughout that 4-year period, they were all deeply engaged in the process. Very, spent time on it. This wasn't just money thrown into a pot. This was people sitting at the table.
That is really powerful. And I love that. And I think we'll hear shortly from some of our leaders who have been on this journey with us, who are also deeply engaged. I did find that really interesting, though, for next time, the smaller contributions from your citizens, again, playing to that grassroots efforts. That's really interesting.
Janet, I'll just make a quick comment that I think is relevant. In our case, the chamber did not raise much money. And it was a little dicey as to whether we were going to get their support for the reasons I mentioned earlier. But there is, and I'll give you some encouragement, within the engineering and the construction community, there's significant support, and we were very lucky to have that support. In LA, I know, interestingly, the labor unions, because of the manufacturing and jobs component, in LA, they sold it as a jobs creation initiative as well, and they were building rail cars there. That wasn't an option that we had, but funding can come from a variety of sources. And I think we didn't raise nearly as much money as Nashville. I think we raised $1.3 million for the actual campaign and maybe $500,000 for the educational campaign.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay. Well, and if y'all want to contribute anything to Charlotte too, we'll take it. I'm kidding. Okay. So let me just ask one last question, then we'll go quickly to the audience Q&A. But, just if you could step back and help friends in the Charlotte region, just hone in on one key factor that drove the outcome that you think would be instructive for us as we, again, pursue a transformational mobility network. What advice would you give us?
Well, I think Ralph underscored it. I think you've got to start with sort of a bottoms-up plan that will create consensus through the community. I think the thing I'm proudest of is that we had a unanimous city council, and we had the chamber, the real estate association, the downtown association, and over time we were able to convince everybody that this was a good plan.
And I would kind of underscore that as well. Look, trust through engagement, we think is really the key. I think, again, we had a very popular mayor that could propel the idea that we used to say that transit plan was the biggest plan that the mayor could pass. And then when the mayor left the field, we couldn't pass it. And I think the big lesson we learned was engage people early, engage people broadly, and build the trust so that it's the idea that is being voted on as compared to any of the leadership or the people.
Yeah.
Janet, I might just mention one other element of ours that I think was important, and that is we came up with an independent board to govern the construction. So there was a lot of baggage around our city council, particularly in the business community. And there was some historical baggage related to Cap Metro that we had somewhat overcome, but we specifically provided for and campaigned on an independent, newly created body to oversee the construction and independently audit the dollars, even though these were city dollars that we were voting on and ultimately federal dollars that would come in through Cap Metro. I think the independent board, to Ralph's point about trust, help communicate that we were doing everything we could to keep this from being the same old sort of politics.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That's also reflective of the times we're in, right? I think it's instructive for us to make sure that we are building the coalitions and building the trust all the way around 360 degrees. So thank you both for shoring that up. Okay, we've got only one question. Well, we have many questions, but we've got time for one. And this one I think is interesting. So have either of your markets taken a fresh look at more of the anticipated traffic patterns post-pandemic and had to reflect on and alternate any of your plans? I guess maybe, Wade, that's maybe more relevant for y'all since you're in it.
You know, that's that was certainly one of the campaign issues. Will folks, will the commute patterns go back to what they were before? And my response on the campaign trail is, was, if you were working remotely, would you rather be in Cleveland or would you rather be in Austin? and I think we've seen some of that. In the middle of the campaign, we saw Elon Musk moving over here and his organization. So we were a little bit fortunate that people continued to see that there wasn't going to be enough change to really dramatically improve our traffic situation. We're a little bit stuck in terms of our inability to really change the main freeways here. So I think that's an interesting issue and one that we had to deal with, but we were able to sort of skate through that one.
Yeah. Ralph, are y'all taking a look at that now?
No, we're taking a look at it, but again, maybe a little bit of difference between our city and your cities. We're starting from scratch here. We have a really rudimentary bus system. Mass transit really doesn't exist anywhere near the magnitude that it needs to in this area. So part of what we've been looking at is the fact that, you know, again, like your cities, we've continued to grow during COVID. I think the big shock for people is going to be that despite work at home or remote work, the in-migration of population and the growth of business organizations has continued during this COVID period. And people are going to be, they're already beginning to be shocked at the magnitude of congestion in traffic and so forth. So yes, we've looked at it, but we're starting really at a baseline of 0. And so we expect transit to be a hot topic again. We think maybe the next referendum for us is 2024.
Well, we'll certainly be watching. And Wade and Ralph, I just want to thank you both. You know, we as markets are certainly competitors. I also think we're peers. Wade, I'm with you, that video, and I'm sure you were smiling throughout it as we showcased Austin. And we'll be there next year, as I mentioned to you, so you can host us in person. But I just appreciate the sharing and the learning and the insights, again, that y'all have provided to us. We're all in this together, at the end of the day. So really appreciate your sharing perspectives. And we're gonna actually head over now for some audience reaction from Malcolm Coley, who is our, Malcolm is the partner with the U.S. Central Region and private leader and Charlotte managing partner for EY. And he is our first vice chair at the Alliance. And I'm also gonna welcome Greg Boulanger, who's vice president of HNTB. He is a Board of Trustees member on our Alliance board, and they're going to help us connect some of these dots. So gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you. And thanks again, Wade and Ralph.
All right, thanks, Janet. And let me also join you in thanking Ralph and Wade, as well as Carol and Michaelina for some enlightening conversation, as well as some good lessons learned from both Austin and Nashville. So why Charlotte? You know, outside of the best bass fishing in the region in Rowan County, as well as, I don't know, Michaelina, I can get to the beach in 3 hours and 15 minutes. It don't take me 4 hours, but just looking at the holistic and diverse industries that we have here in our region, starting with obviously financial services is our anchor, but a good group of healthcare systems. We have great retail and consumer products, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and a great group of diverse industrial products. And the piece that's really is going to come and round out our community is the new med school that's coming with Atrium and Wake Forest. That's going to bring other holistic industries into our market, life science, biotech, pharma, to really round out the different industries and sectors within our great region. And then just the amount of research and the innovation corridor that's going to allow us to incubate and ideate ideas and to create, new innovative companies into our great region. And along with that, we all know that's going to bring, private equity, venture capital monies, and other investments into our great community. So I'm really excited as to why Charlotte and our great region. So with that, I'm going to ask and turn it over to Greg to make some comments.
Thanks, Malcolm. You know, this event's really been music to my ears. You know, Greg Galante with HNTB in the transportation industry. I mean, I could go on for hours about what we've been talking about today, but really taking it back to what Tom Barkin had said. In our peer cities, commute matters. You know, transit options matter. Jobs matter, right? That's why they continue to invest in transportation infrastructure, because this leads to what we're focused on: economic mobility, economic growth, and shaping growth. You know, transportation investment, people understand, leads to transportation options, also reductions in traffic, more time at home, improvements to the environment, as we've seen in COVID, less people driving, the environment's been really improving. Studies as recently as last year are showing that $1 billion in transportation investment leads to 49,700 jobs over 20 years. $1 billion in transportation infrastructure leads to $5 billion in economic output over 20 years. So as Tom Barkin said, you know, those that don't invest in great public transportation, those peer cities that don't do it, will struggle to grow. And that's reality. And that said, our region is growing by 50% to 4.6 million people by 2050. So that's huge. So we need to do something. Again, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we do need to pull together and advocate for our transportation priorities and meet and exceed our growing needs, such as investments in transportation. And we see that as a major conversation this year. As Janet, you mentioned the city as COG in our region, and we really need to pull together and advocate for that. So that said, I hope you all enjoyed the segment. I'll kick it back to you, Janet.
Thanks, Craig, and thank you, Malcolm, for that reaction. And you know we're here for it. We're so excited to explore these investments and know we need to do it. Greg, I'm going to have to. I wrote those down. The $1 billion of transit equals 49,000 jobs, and the $5 billion in economic output. But I'm going to want that information from you, because it's really powerful, really impactful. So thank you both. Okay, folks, we are a little bit behind schedule. We're skipping the bio break that we were going to give you. So make sure you go do that. Hydrate, grab your coffee. Y'all are adults, you can do that yourselves, but we're going to go right in to our next segment and move into racial equity in the business community, which again is another one of our key strategies that the Alliance is focused on. And this is something I know, again, head and heart, our community cares very deeply about. And the deep racial divides and disparities are not limited to the Charlotte region. Again, I think President Barkin gave us some insight on some of the just legacy history that race plays in the conversations around economic mobility, and why we have some real catching up to do. So as we're also grieving with our friends in Colorado, I also want to acknowledge the mass shooting and deaths of the 8 people in Atlanta. The rise of the anti-Asian sentiment around the coronavirus and attacks on Asians in particular, those attacks on the elderly, and now these last shootings have really shaken me personally, as I have feared for hatred that my parents and my brothers and my relatives, and of course my own children, have already or may experience in the future. And what's happened in Atlanta has actually led to the introduction of hate crimes legislation here in North Carolina, which we will certainly be paying attention to at the Alliance, because as the voice of business, again, we're advocating to be an inclusive community and one that embraces diversity of all kind. And in fact, we are a member of the South Carolina Metro Chamber Coalition, a very proud member of that group, as they have welcomed and embraced the Charlotte region to their fold. And through that coalition, we have already supported the hate crimes legislation that's been proposed in South Carolina. So just know we are committed to racial equity in the business community, and we're about to hear from our peers in Atlanta and Cincinnati who will help us on our journey to equitable economic growth. So again, we're going to try the Q&A before I introduce Karen and Katie and Darren. please make sure that you message Ashley Hedrick in the private chat, and we'll see if we can catch up on time. It's my now pleasure to welcome Katie Kirkpatrick, who currently serves as the president and CEO of the 160-year-old Metro Atlanta Chamber, also known as MAC. Katie is known for her public policy prowess, her courageous leadership, and more than a decade of driving impact through her work at MAC. The work she's about to talk about has been circulating. It's viral. It's gone viral here in the Charlotte region. We applaud it, and we're excited, Katie, to hear from you. So let me turn it over to you. It's good to see you, friend.
Yeah, it's nice to see you, Janet, and thank you for recognizing the heinous murders that took place here in our region. It's certainly a discomforting time here. And I also just do want to recognize a few folks that are Atlanta, at least served on our executive committee with Tom Barkin and Heath Campbell. I want to say hey, and then also want to acknowledge that Carrie Hackett has joined your team. And I'm pleased that she is there in Charlotte helping drive your mission and purpose. And so I want to get right into this. Of course, I started my position as president and CEO in June of 2020 at a time when we were facing obviously social unrest, economic uncertainty, and a pandemic. And so just to reflect back, our institution has three kind of founding principles that we operate under, and that's grow, advocate, and promote. And, none of those are going to sound any different from probably the work that you all are doing. And I'll let you know when to advance the slides if that helps you. Grow, of course, is all about job creation and supporting our Innovation and Entrepreneurship Committee. Advocate, we focus on 4 core areas. I wanted to jump in so badly on the transit discussion, and also happy to answer any questions on hate crimes because I led the effort here to pass hate crimes. But we focus on business climate, infrastructure, natural resources, the environment, and the educated workforce. And then finally, of course, our third foundation is promote, which is that integrated marketing and communications for our region, includes our platform called Choose ATL, and also includes our Atlanta Sports Council, which is recruiting and hosting those international and national events like Super Bowl and World Cup. So obviously I came in June, the challenges were before us. We set a course forward to focus on, in addition to the 3 that I just highlighted for you, were to focus on public health, economic recovery, and racial equity. And I know I'm here to talk to you about racial equity today. And I think importantly, my board and our executive committee said to me as I came into the role that we need to double down as a business community with a collective strength and a collective impact to really look at the process of reconciliation for the business community and our role in systemic racism. And we know that our region is well positioned to do better and to do more. And that's why we launched the ATL Action for Racial Equity that I'm going to share with you all today. I want to share that we have more than 216 companies now that have committed to action, and that we as an organization are also one of those signatories. I know that we have more work just within our own organization. I will say that I'm proud that our leadership team reflects diversity, and that both with gender and racial diversity. A third of our staff are people of color, and we've already increased over the last 6 months people of color on our board by 5%, as well as the number of women. So we're committed to this journey and proudly walking the talk, but we have work to do very clearly. So how did we get here? I think it's very important first for us as a community, we needed to look back and look at the history. Many of you know that we are known as the cradle of the civil rights movement, and for good reason. The city became the epicenter of the movement as our Black leaders fought for voting rights, access to public accommodations, education, and economic opportunities for African Americans. Leaders that we've recently lost with John Lewis and C.T. Vivian, as well as Ambassador Andrew Young, who is still active in our community, and MLK as well. And so I'm also proud to say that when you look at the history of the Metro Atlanta Chamber, we advocated for the end of school segregation in 1960, and we also called on the business community to comply with civil rights legislation. Another important fact that I didn't know until we started looking at data and looking at history, that in 1970, our chamber also helped launch the Georgia Minority Supplier Development Council. I always get that out of order, to attract underrepresented businesses to the state. And that institution still thrives today, but it's its own organization. And then, as you mentioned, more recently, we advocated not only on religious liberty, preventing, discrimination based on LGBTQ here in the state, but obviously passage of the hate crimes law. We recently just supported the repeal of citizen's arrest here in the state. That is on the governor's desk. And then we've also committed more than $300,000 to support Black-owned businesses that have been impacted by the pandemic. One other piece that I'd like to say, and I'm rolling without moving my slides, so let's bump forward a slide or two. Let's go one more. Here we go. I do want to call attention to our historically Black colleges and universities here. It's a strength and something that we're quite proud of. It was the epicenter of the civil rights movement, but it is the key to our rich pipeline of diverse talent and really underpins our economic development success over the last probably 5 years and continues to accelerate that economic investment here. It remains a hub of our culture that influences the world, as we like to say. Atlanta influences everything from music, film, and art, and politics, etc. So other than our HBCUs, which, by the way, I think we have 4 at the Atlanta University Consortium. We also have Georgia Tech that awards more engineering degrees to women and underrepresented minorities than anyone else in the United States. We've got Georgia State that awards more bachelor's degrees to Black students than anyone else in the nation. And then, of course, Emory University is a top private institution and top employer for diverse talent. All of that to say that when you look at the data, Atlanta leads the nation as a welcoming and diverse community, but immobility and inequity are too prevalent in our community. And we know sadly that Atlanta, and I think Charlotte as well, rank at the bottom of the list of the 50 US cities in economic mobility. And I want to commend Charlotte for owning the problem and working in an intentional way over the last 3-4 years to drive change. We have been watching and learning from what you all have been doing. But that's another reason why we have the urgency of now to rally our community to take bold action. Not a pledge. This is action to solve the most pressing problems that we have in our community. And so this year we created, after 6 months, an effort that's multi-year. I like to say it's generational, multi-step action plan designed to help address the ongoing effects of systemic racism, impacting specifically our Black community. I've gotten questions on why we are so surgical. And when we look at the data, and you can see the data on our website, it calls for action now for our Black community. It does not prevent us in the future for expanding our work, but we are intentionally focused on our Black community, Black business, and Black talent through this work. I've mentioned we have 200-something companies that are already committed to action, and the purpose is to leverage size, scale, and expertise to advance racial equity. And we have 4 priority areas. Let's jump forward one slide, I think. We have 4 core areas that we are focused on with measurable actions. The first is corporate policies. I will speak briefly on that piece. Inclusive economic development, education, and workforce development. These are the 4 areas where we are starting with collective impact through the business community. And we know that these are critical areas for addressing immobility and inequity based on data. We are really using data to drive this work. This is more than a pledge. I've probably said that 10 times. We want people to take action. And importantly, we want to measure. So we want you to take action and we want to measure. And so we've created key performance indicators under each of those 4 priority areas in order for us to report on an annual basis to the community and to the businesses on our progress or lack thereof. It is okay to fail. I have said that repeatedly, but we want to fail fast and pivot and recognize what we can change. And so again, this is building on the legacy. I want to call out that the Corporate Policies Playbook is one that we have created first. It launched when we brought this to the community in February. It is a guide on how to execute, and it's a tool and it's a resource. You can visit our website, www.atlracialequity.com, and download the playbook if you'd like to take a look at it. And let's scroll forward one more slide because I want to get to the end. So just to give you a sense of the actions here, we are asking for businesses that have committed to action to take these 8 core actions within their businesses. The playbook is much more detailed, and it actually leverages whether or not you're emerging, progressing, or leading in the DEI space, because we recognize regardless of size of a company, everybody is in a different place on this journey. And so we're working finally on the final 3 playbooks. The Inclusive Economic Development Playbook is set to launch April 15th. And we've been lucky and fortunate to have PwC as our partner in this process, helping us guide through. But I will end there and turn it back to you, Janet. I know we have another speaker, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Katie, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I mean, it's clear that they'll have a long history in fighting for racial justice. And, you know, again, hat tip to all of you. We too are watching y'all, and this is incredibly, I think, instructive for us. I want to mention that the Alliance has been working to co-convene and co-lead Mayor Lyles's work on racial equity here in the city of Charlotte, and we are hoping again to scale that those lessons across the region. But just so you know, we've taken a cue from I think again what y'all list as emerging and progressing and leading, and we're trying to do something similar as we start to establish some metrics around this in terms of lagging, tracking, and leading. So you know, we really appreciate that leadership that y'all are doing, and excited for you. If you can hang out and you know, be available for some questions, we're gonna turn over to Darren here in a moment. Yeah, thanks, Katie. Okay, so Darren Reedus, Senior, serves as the Senior Vice President and Executive Director for the Cincinnati, USA Regional Chamber, in charge of its flagship Minority Business Accelerator program and regional inclusion efforts. I know, Darren, that we too are looking to figure out how we scale and help some of our Black and Brown owned businesses. That is something, again, that Mayor Lyles here in Charlotte has focused on. We're anxious to hear what you have to say, sir. So turning it over to you, Darren. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join you. And this is certainly, you know, a topic that is near and dear to my heart on many levels. As mentioned, my name is Darren Reedus. I serve as the Senior Vice President of the Cincinnati Chamber and also Executive Director of its Minority Business Accelerator. I've actually been in Cincinnati about 5 years now, relocated here actually from Cleveland. I've been in this space for, it's hard to believe, better than 30 years at this point. And so excited to kind of share some things here. Was thrilled to be able to take the helm of something that really was created, you know, way back in 2003, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I'll dig right into our model and kind of get through some of the details here. So next slide, please. So the Minority Business Accelerator, its mission, which it has been from its launch in 2003, is to accelerate the development of sizable, keyword, sizable minority businesses and strengthen and expand the regional minority entrepreneurial community. Sizable in this case means minority firms, and I'll be very specific. When this work began, it was exclusively focused on the African American community. The Hispanic business population was added some years later. And that's certainly rooted in just the data, as was mentioned, the economic disparities, specifically in the African American community. Sizable in this case means firms $1 million in revenue and up. That was a starting point for us. This work then and now is rooted in creating more viable minority firms to be suppliers to our corporate community, our Procter & Gamble and Kroger and Fifth Third and others. And so the belief was we had to at least have some capacity and scale to begin with. And so that was determined at $1 million in revenue and a B2B or B2G business model. Next slide. Brief historical profile. As I mentioned, the work began in 2003. Importantly, this work was actually birthed from Cincinnati's civil unrest back in 2001, the infamous Cincinnati riots. And so we actually created this accelerator, frankly, before there were accelerators. Cincinnati Action Now, a commission that was pulled together to really examine, how can we do a better job of solving for economic disparities. So this was one of a few pieces that was launched from that commission, really trying to, again, solve for at least a piece of the economic disparity equation through high growth entrepreneurship. We started with 20 companies back in 2003, 2004, and had about $100 million in spend at that time across those firms. Next slide. So today, there's an active portfolio of about 42 companies. In reality, we service about 70 that meet that $1 million or better threshold. There's just at different levels of intensity in terms of engagement. So we say about 42 like really active firms that we're working with, but it really ebbs and flows. And those firms do over $1 billion in aggregate revenues together, about $1.5 billion at this point, and have created about 3,500 jobs since this work began. Next slide. When I came on board, one of the charges was to take this work to the proverbial next level. And so we ultimately defined that as growing by an incremental billion and creating an incremental 3,500 jobs. So ultimately 2 billion and 7,000 jobs within a 5 to 7 year window. Next slide. And so this is just a little bit of a timeline in terms of what that looks like. Just in condensing it, we're trying to, today the companies are about 30 million-ish in terms of average size. We're trying to grow that to about 50 million-ish, if you will, over time. As I mentioned, the minimum to enter the group is $1 million. So we have the full spectrum of firms that we work with. Some of our longer standing firms are north of 100 million, and a few are close to $500 million. Interestingly, our work, as I mentioned, unlike today's accelerators, and not in any way to speak negatively about those models, but this was an accelerator, again, launched in 2003, 2004, before the proliferation of tech accelerators and things of that nature. So we really don't graduate companies in the traditional sense of accelerators. So we work with these companies year after year after year. Every year is a refreshed growth plan, a refreshed how do we get to the next level. And I frankly think that's one of the secrets of our success is that even though these companies get to a certain size and scale, many of our largest firms still encounter institutional roadblocks and things of that nature. So there's always a different set of activities to solve for. And so we never really graduate folks. So we stay with these companies year after year, and it really has produced results. Next slide. So in getting to that $1 billion lift, and that's that incremental sort of next level, we sort of reshaped our work into 4 primary efforts in what we call grow, build, attract, and create. The grow pillar is really the core work that I mentioned from inception, just continuing. Let's continue to grow our current companies of size to their next level. We've got some great work going on with our healthcare partners and broader supplier diversity initiatives, regionally and nationally. But the grow work is really the core, just continuing. Let's continue to grow our current companies, again, upside to their next level. The build pillar is really about pipeline building. So as I mentioned, to enter into the accelerator, companies have to be at least $1 million in revenue. So this build pillar looks at companies below that threshold and how can we get them to $1 million and beyond. And so this is work that we do in collaboration with 9 other nonprofits in the Cincinnati region we call the CMBC, or the Cincinnati Minority Business Collaborative, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Our attract pillar is trying to attract larger scale minority firms here in gaps of where we don't have them. And to be clear, it's really more about expansion than it is attraction, because we're not trying to have companies relocate here. but doing business in the region in hopes that that business leads to that company putting an office here or expanding here. So it's really about, you know, expansion to fill in where we don't have certain minority firms in our community. And finally, what's getting a lot of traction is creating minority businesses through acquisition. Acquisition of mainstream or non-minority firms, if you will, with no succession plan, no kids in the company interested in taking it over. How can we identify and support credible minority buyers to acquire existing companies of size and scale and create companies that are minority owned and led without having to always grow everything organically from the ground up? Depending on the report that one reads, there are literally trillions of dollars in play with aging business owners of small to mid-cap companies with no succession plan. Their kids do not want to run that stamping plan or whatever it may be. And so just an enormous kind of natural wealth transfer opportunity to piggyback on acquisitions and succession planning. Next slide. This is just a quick visual of the core work of the accelerator, our historical model, just in a bit of a quick graphical depiction. We fundamentally do two core things. One is we take deep dives into our minority firms, comprehensive business assessments, SWOT analyses, et cetera, to really ensure that there is a state of readiness to do business with our corporate community, so that when we actually refer minority firms to our corporate partners, that referral means something because they know we have vetted thoroughly, we have prepared thoroughly, we're blowing holes in financial projections, cash flows, et cetera, and we're really more like a boutique consulting group, if you will. And so while that development work is happening, we are concurrently working with our corporate partners, helping them establish and expand spend goals for certain ones that are perhaps newer to the space, understanding the business case for inclusion, and just all that goes with helping the corporation kind of up its game, if you will, with having a more diverse supply chain. Next slide. And so I mentioned the pipeline building work, and I'm going rather quickly. I know we're on a time limit here. Happy to follow up with other, questions and such as we go forward. But I mentioned the pipeline building work. So what you see here is just a snapshot of the logos of the various other nonprofits that we work with in our community, many of which are, you'll see in many communities, whether it's the Urban League or the African American Chamber, Hispanic Chamber, NMSDC councils, et cetera. And so fundamentally, this work is trying to identify 10 emerging minority firms a year, or 50 over 5 years, that we believe have upside potential. And for the sake of definition, we defined upside potential as the ability to grow to $5 million in revenue or better in 3 to 5 years, and the ability to create 15 jobs or more around the same time frame. Importantly, in this work, if one can sort of think about what has become very popular in the tech ecosystem with, pitch nights and all those sorts of things, well, in the tech space, a tremendous amount of work goes into helping those tech entrepreneurs present to angel investors and venture capitalists. That entrepreneur just doesn't show up that day automatically prepared. But unfortunately, if you don't have a sexy tech company, you often don't benefit from that kind of assistance. We bring that very same high level, intense assistance to high growth, not necessarily high tech companies that also have to really be able to understand and articulate their value proposition, their market analysis, segmentation, all the same business fundamentals, and prepare them to pitch often to different audiences. Our presentations are not just angels and VCs, but alternative funders, banks, private investors, et cetera. And so this is really trying to scale up companies, and we'll frankly capture many in the tech space that might get some seed capital, but fall out because they're not attractive enough to institutional VCs. So this pipeline work is really picking up steam as well. Next slide. I mentioned the business attraction work. So our mainstream economic development partner in Cincinnati is called Ready Cincinnati. And so we partner very closely with Ready just as part of their core work. Their work broadly is to try to attract firms to the region and expand companies, et cetera. And we sat down with Ready a little while back to say, well, when you go hunting for companies, what's the profile of what it is that you hunt for? And we fundamentally landed on businesses north of $20 million in revenue and operating in certain NAICS codes that align with our regional strengths. So this is really about trying to fill gaps in our community. If we don't have minority firms in our current portfolio, if we don't have it in the pipeline, how can we perhaps attract some of that minority talent to the region in important gaps in our community? And so this is a complementary strategy to our core efforts. And then next slide. And finally, this creating larger firms through acquisition is really picking up a lot of steam. We are partnering very closely with our area banks and accounting firms and law firms, who, if you think about it, their very clientele are the businesses that lack succession plans, right? And so that $2 to $50 million company, and so we're working very closely with our centers of influence in that regard. We're not exclusively looking at manufacturing, but it's an industry we have a lot of emphasis on for many reasons. Manufacturing, real quickly, as folks I'm sure understand, being a capital intensive industry with heavy equipment, heavy assets, et cetera, overlaid against historical lack of access to capital for entrepreneurs of color. Of course, you're not going to see a lot of minority owned manufacturing firms in today's national landscape. But what a tremendous opportunity to acquire into those industries, as these very same companies are now faced with aging business owners, no succession plans, et cetera. And because of those heavy assets, they're actually easier to finance. And so manufacturing also is a great industry that is highly conducive to workforce initiatives. A lot of people of color can easily be working more in the manufacturing sector if the awareness was there. Very conducive to job training. You don't have to necessarily have an advanced degree to operate machinery. And so it's just an industry we really want to spend a lot of time and emphasis on going forward. Next slide. So in wrapping up, these next two slides are just really a snapshot of our corporate partners. Many names that you'll likely see in your own communities, but I'd like to show these next couple of slides because, quite frankly, absent the commitment of our corporate community, this work doesn't happen. Honestly, when this work first began back in 2003, it was through the leadership of certainly Procter & Gamble and Cincinnati Children's Hospital, et cetera. And it was no accident. It was very intentional that this work was housed within the mainstream chamber, which at the time was led by who is now the CEO of Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And so the business community rallied their CEO peers to really dig into this work. And so without that commitment, this work just doesn't happen. And so we've been fortunate. I know we're kind of wrapped up on time here, but we've also created a playbook for our core work, which actually launched last year, was funded by the Kauffman Foundation. We're in the process of launching a fund, lots of things going on to invest across those four pillars. And so, again, thank you for the opportunity to share today, and just happy to be a part of such a great conversation.
Thank you, Darren, and congratulations on all of that. There's so much there that I just want to piggyback on, but I know you actually have a hard stop. I'm sure Katie does too, so I appreciate that y'all are still with us. I'm going to try to fold in the questions that have been filtered over to me into one, and ask you both to just take a stab at it. But you know, obviously the last year, a lot has transpired in this space of racial equity. And as we as organizations and leaders within our organizations are trying to make sure that we have a role and responsibility in, again, shaping a more inclusive economy, I'd like to hear from both of you on what you think the business community's response has been in the last year. We obviously know we've been committed to this work, and it's a journey, and Katie, as you said, generational. This is more than just an annual plan type of thing. But are you asking the business community for contributions other than financial, mentoring, internships, co-creating some of the programming? Could you just highlight one of those and share that with us?
I will say absolutely, because I think one of the criticisms of the business community has been that we immediately issued pledges and then wrote big checks. And that ultimately is good. We need investment, but really there needs to be something more granular that is led and implemented by the business community. And so you know, I would call attention to, and I'm sure Charlotte is experiencing the same thing, you know, a K-shaped recovery, right? So we know that many in our community are doing well despite of the impacts of the pandemic, but we know that when we look at that inequity, it is only broadened. And so through our inclusive economic development playbook, we will be calling on businesses to do a couple of things, but one good example there would be banking Black. And I think that is super important, but we also have to be mindful that the infrastructure is not in place yet for our Black bank institutions across the United States to take in this wholesale wave of investment. So we are looking at creative ways through the Black Bank Fund and the Black Bank Foundation to partner and help create those opportunities that we saw the Atlanta Hawks take advantage of in a recent refinance that they did. So that's just one example.
Thanks, Katie. Darren?
Yeah, absolutely. To your point about beyond, you know, writing a check, as we've all seen, lots of corporations making announcements and such, which is great. But I think, you know, the real work of bringing that to fruition and addressing the a lot of the realities of when we talk about, for example, more deeply, if you will, diversifying supply chains. If we don't address the lack of scale of minority firms, then that's going to be a fairly short-lived initiative, right? And so, because the reality is the corporate America, if you will, and its desire and need to stay globally competitive, et cetera, has been, you know, consolidating, frankly, its supply chain for years. And so that natural consolidation results often in fewer vendors in the supply chain having to take on more work and more capacity, more scale. And so these are realities that also have to be addressed with how do we then create more scalable, you know, minority-owned firms, which is why the acquisition route that I mentioned is really appealing, and our banking and accounting and law firm partners locking arms with us and doing joint webinars and things of that nature, to your point again, about more than just writing a check, but how do we leverage their credibility with their clientele to really enlighten them on the realities and the benefits, quite frankly, of potentially selling to a diverse buyer. And so we're super excited about that work. I'm excited about what seems to be really a different reaction nationally, but different in a positive way. But at the same time, we've got to address some long-standing disparities also around when we talk about access to capital. We have addressed in many ways access to debt, but equity capital is a very different animal. And the preparation for equity capital is still subpar, in my opinion. And so these are other things that we're working with our corporate partners to really provide this education and enlightenment and access and awareness. And so I am seeing very much a different reaction.
That's great. Katie and Darren, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing with us your best practices, and we will be sure to stay tuned and keep in communication with you on how y'all are doing, and report back to you too on how the Charlotte region's doing. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. So I'd like to now welcome Daniel Webster from PricewaterhouseCoopers. As Katie mentioned, the Charlotte region too has been working with PwC on its CEO on Action and Diversity and Inclusion work. We're a proud signatory of that effort. And Daniel comes to us this morning. He is a PwC assurance partner who has more than 22 years of diverse public accounting experience. In addition to his client work, he is one of PwC's Southeast Diversity and Inclusion champions. He spent several years leading PwC's financial literacy program in New Jersey. And Daniel, welcome and thank you for being here. I'm going to turn the floor over to you for a poll. Oh, and you're on mute.
Am I off?
You're good. Thank you.
At least I wasn't the first, so apologies for that. Thank you, Janet. It's a pleasure being here today, and I've really enjoyed hearing all the presenters. And thanks, Katie and Darren, for your leadership in this space. It's certainly important to PwC, and it's glad to see it's hear that it's important to others. So we'll do a few polls. I think we cut a few of them just with time, and so hopefully the technology has been updated. But as a reminder, in the chat function, you should be able to access the polls. Within that feature, people are already starting to answer the question. So the first question here, does your organization have policies and strategies regarding the following elements of racial equity and diversity? And so this is one, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just pick all that apply. I won't read them all for the sake of time. And so it looks to be that we have, kind of a spread of, kind of all of these different options, which is great, because again, there's really no right answer. The important thing here is that everybody, is focusing on, something that's important to their organization and helping to drive change. So it's great to see that we've got a little bit of, each of the options here. Okay, so then the next question, and which of the following racial equity opportunities is your organization investing in the Charlotte region? And so again, check all that apply, no right or wrong answers. These are, and then by no means are these all of the options, but these are some of maybe the more important. So reskilling and digital upskilling and workforce training, I see is a big one. And public education and higher education, which we saw earlier, is a certainly a big driver for growth in our region. So good to see that everyone's focusing there. Excellent. Also, early childhood education. Great. So I think we're going to keep it just to these two polling questions. That's correct. So, okay, well, thanks again. And, certainly, again, PwC, this is a priority for us. And, the D&I journey is a difficult challenge for everyone. But, like most things, it's, of utmost importance. It's also the right thing to do. So I'm really glad to see the engagement in this area. And with that, I'll thank you. And then I'll turn it over to Heath Campbell, President of the Metrolina region of Truist, and Reg Henderson, Vice President of Government Relations at Lowe's, and both CLT Alliance Committee members to share some reflections.
Hi, thank you, David, and thanks for all of our participants and board members today. We're so grateful to spend the time with you today on behalf of the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. I think hopefully I share a unified message that we've heard the message on economic development, exploring economies, had a great deal of sense of pride for where Charlotte is positioned, not only today, but have a lot of hope of where we can go. I believe our motto, the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, to move forward together, is absolutely the right strategy. So as we transition into one of our greatest challenges that we're facing in Charlotte, the socioeconomic mobility, which has the components of racial equity, I'm reminded by one of the big lessons we've learned in the acceleration of this digital age that's happening right before us in the pandemic, that it feels like sometimes society has become too quick to speak and perhaps too slow to listen. Your participation today is critically important. We believe as we move forward together, we are at our best when we are united. We're not perfect, but we are at our best when we are united. That is philanthropically, that is civically, and it is corporately. I'd like to turn it over to Reginald Henderson with Lowe's, who's going to talk about some of those strategies of how we're moving forward at the Regional Business Alliance to address some of those greatest opportunities to celebrate where we are today, but how we move forward together. So Reginald, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Heath. You're right when you talk about the importance of listening, and as our speakers have underscored, the importance of taking action. And so some of the things that we're doing is we're actively engaging and educating lawmakers on the opportunity, the challenge, and the solutions to create a more equitable business community. Another thing that we're doing is building regional capacity to scale diverse small businesses by connecting Black and Brown-owned businesses and entrepreneurs of color with enterprises and increasing access to capital, innovation, supplier diversity, social capital, and advisory consulting support. Another thing is just being the region's go-to for business leaders, employers, and employees. And the speakers also underscored the importance of measuring So what we're doing is identifying racial equity programs and metrics and sharing best practices with the region's business community. And measuring inclusion to know that we are changing the outcomes. And lastly, I'm just creating spaces for racial dialogue and understanding. We recognize that there is so much more to be done. So we must continue to listen as we continue to embark upon this journey. Thank you. And back to Heath.
Actually, I think we're going to go right to Carol, but Reg and Heath, thank you so much. Carol, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Janet. I can't tell you how excited I am over everything we've heard today. And Reg and Heath, thank you for your comments. Very, very important. We're on our way for sure. We had a chance to catch up with our governors, to finish this up, to wrap it up today, to ask them some pretty visionary questions. We had the help of a couple of expert interviewers on the executive committee, and you'll know them. Tom Glick is an Alliance Executive Committee member, and he's the president of business operations of the Carolina Panthers. And he caught up with South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster. And Fred Whitfield, also an Alliance Executive Committee member, and he's the president, vice chairman, alternate governor, and minority owner of the Charlotte Hornets. Fred circled up with North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper. Let's listen to those conversations right now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Glick, president of Tepper Sports and Entertainment and a member of the executive committee at the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. And I'm here with my good friend, Governor Henry McMaster. Governor McMaster, hello and welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Good to see you again. Look forward to seeing you in Columbia sometime soon.
Well, I do as well. I think the last time we saw each other pre-COVID was at a Panther game or maybe the Gamecocks at Bank of America Stadium, but it is great to be able to meet virtually today for this event.
Yes, yeah. Happy to be here.
Before we begin, I'd like to say on behalf of Tepper Sports and Entertainment and the Carolina Panthers, how much we appreciate our partnership with you and the state of South Carolina. I reflect back a couple years ago, you and David Tepper with the vision and the catalyst to build something amazing and game-changing in the city of Rock Hill. It's moving on, it's right on schedule. And in addition to being the new HQ and training center for the Carolina Panthers, it's going to be so much more, something for everybody, and regionally and nationally significant destination. So we're appreciative, and we're looking forward to bringing it to life together with you and enjoying it.
Well, that was a great vision that Dave Tepper had about that, the whole thing, and it's going to be a marvelous place. It's going to add so much to the region. It's a lot, of course, a lot more than football, but football is a lot. But all the things that are planned for that are very exciting, and we're just delighted to participate. And we're glad that the stars lined up and everything worked out, and it's moving forward.
Well, we are as well, and thanks for your role in that. So today's event is about exploring economies. And all of us at the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance are grateful for the opportunity to hear your thoughts and insights on how we compete and drive the Charlotte regional economy and create opportunity and prosperity for all. I have a number of questions that I think our audience will be eager to hear and to share your advice and your insights on. Shall we dive in?
Sure.
Okay. So, Governor, the first question is about managing through the pandemic. And, over the last 12 months, we've lived through an unprecedented amount of disruption. And even so, South Carolina has maintained an unemployment rate below the national average. What do you attribute this great result to? And I wanted to ask particular about the role that Accelerate SC and your task force has played. And maybe as you answer, for those in the audience who may not be familiar with the task force, Accelerate SC, what it is, you can explain that and then talk about how you've done so well.
Well, what Accelerate SC was, and still is, they are available to come back. There are 4 or 5 different subgroups of that, but it consisted essentially of just over 30 leaders in their fields from around the state. The idea was to get together as the pandemic began and to figure out how we would go through it and how we would go get out of it. And they met in subgroups and the whole group together for about 30 days off and on, and ended up with a proposal, a plan for advice to follow. But everybody was represented on there from around the state. People participated. We had business leaders, people from the restaurants, the manufacturers, developers, medical professors, doctors, nurses, educators from the public school system, private school system, as well as the universities. We had legislators on there. I mean, every segment of South Carolina life and business was represented. And what we did is we followed the 3 C's: communicate, collaborate, and cooperate. And that gave us a blueprint on what to do. So what we did is we determined, rather than trying to determine what kind of work was essential and what was non-essential, we just took the information and science and data we had to see which kind of circumstances and which kind of businesses, places resulted in the most spread. And that's where we limited things. We never did shut down. We never shut down. We closed in limited places for as short as possible. And today we have no restrictions at all on anybody. And we haven't had any for several weeks. And we just had 2 several weeks ago, the last couple on big crowds. But before that, we lifted everything. We didn't have a mandatory mask mandate, for example, because we thought that could be handled better by the local people, knowing their businesses, knowing their clientele and all that. And we believe it worked. So when the virus hit, we were really booming. We were at about 2.4% unemployment. In April or so, it went up to about 12.5%. And now we're back at 5.3%. So our very deliberate, careful, targeted approach worked. We didn't shut down. And as a result, while in some states they're having to dig themselves out of a hole, we're just about where we were when the thing began. We more unemployment, but people are ready to go. We spent a lot of the CARES money going into our uninsurance trust fund, unemployment trust fund. And as a result, we have just as money in there now as we had at the beginning before the virus got here. So what that means, we don't have to raise the business taxes, unemployment taxes on anybody. So we were very careful. We didn't raise our budget. We stuck with the last year's budget. We targeted millions of dollars of the CARES Act primarily to the schools and the small businesses, because that's where they were really suffering. And we're doing that again now in the current budget that we're working on. We tried very hard to keep the schools open. The governor in this state is not in charge of that and had no authority to require it to happen, but we pushed. We provided the PPE, the personal protective equipment, all of that sort of stuff. And right now, I think we've got about 54% of our schools, 55% are wide open. Some never did close. None of the private schools closed. We've got about over 400,000 students in face-to-face 5 days a week. The rest are in some sort of a hybrid system. But we did very well. The housing industry is booming. The home builders said that last year, 2020, was better than 2019. And in 2020, here's a number for you. BMW produced more cars in Spartanburg, South Carolina, in their plant there, than any of their other plants in the world. And they have 31 facilities in 15 countries. We didn't close manufacturers at all. We gave them information, advice. They looked at what Accelerate SC said, and it worked. And so that's what we're doing.
Well, my takeaway from what you just said is you've got a lot on your plate, and you have had for the last year. But it's a great example in leadership and influence, as you said, where you didn't have control, and I think a tremendous story of economic revitalization, which will be important for us going forward. If I could ask about, I want to ask about two groups, communities of color and women in the workforce, who have been particularly hard hit in the last year due to COVID-19. Not only that, these these two groups have been hard hit, are accelerating the widening of the wealth gap. Do you have a view? Could you talk a little bit about what policies come to mind, what policies we ought to adopt with these groups and others in mind?
Well, one thing, the women in the workforce, many of the women had to stay home with the children, some men, because the schools weren't open. So getting the school open is a major part of that. That's why every day we were urging all the district leaders and others to look at the facts, look at the science. It was shown that the schools were probably the safest place to be. The children were not spreading the virus. 94% of those people who got real sick and died in South Carolina, I think about 95% were over 55 years of age, and very few from in childhood up to 18, maybe probably not as many as 10 the whole time. So that really hit them hard, and we had about 2,000 child care places. Some of them had to close down, but we've got most of them, we supported them strongly throughout the pandemic and still are, and we've got most of them open now, about 94%. So if the schools would all open up, and the child care centers would be available for those that need them, then we can make a lot of progress. But now one thing we have to do is get the vaccine out into a lot of the rural areas that are underserved. They don't have hospitals. Most of them have pharmacies. So we are depending very much on our pharmacies and pushing and urging and helping, as well as the big hospitals and stand-up sites. So we have them all over the place to see that anyone who wants a vaccine gets it. And I think that the fact that we've done so well so far, and the availability of the vaccine, the Trump administration bought, I think, 800 million doses of vaccine in preparation for this. It hadn't even been produced yet. Some of it has been stockpiled. It's been rolled out. The Biden administration is pushing real hard as well. So as more and more people get the vaccination, more and more people will have comfort. But our rate of spread is way, way down. It's way down every day to about 4% of those that test tested test positive, and we have hundreds of test sites still. But the main, it all goes back to education, and there's no short-term answer. It's a long-term project, and that's why we got to have the very best schools. We have to invest in education. We got to invest in infrastructure. We want to have the most competitive workforce in this state, anywhere in the country, and our research universities work with our technical colleges, work with the four-year schools, and we want to have a comprehensive education reform to have for 4K available for any child that wants it, and we're investing heavily in education.
Well, that's great. These are great steps that you're taking. It's such a hugely important area. Creating economic prosperity for all is hugely important to the Charlotte region and indeed to the Alliance. So it's great to hear what you're doing in South Carolina.
Well, I ought to say it takes some money. That's why we're putting $60 million more dollars into need-based scholarships based on the same sort of Pell Grant formula in the public schools, and I think it's about about 20 million going to the private schools, the independent schools, and the historically Black schools. And education is the key in training, and that's why we are also putting money for those people who've been displaced to go through the technical college system. We have millions of dollars going there for retraining and for scholarships there as well. So that's our plan.
Fantastic. Governor, I want to shift gears and ask you about the South Carolina's view of the Charlotte region. We've been on a roll here over the last 5 years. The GDP is up 30% in the Charlotte region. And I value getting your views on what a strong Charlotte means to South Carolina.
Strong Charlotte means business. It means prosperity. It means happiness. There are people from South Carolina work in Charlotte, as you know, work in the city, work around the city. I think there's a lot of people in North Carolina work in South Carolina, but a magnet for investment in people in industry like that spreads out all over the place. The state line doesn't mean a thing when it comes to that. So what we want to try to do is to understand that everything that we do here in South Carolina has an impact in North Carolina, that is through the law and investment, and also that everything that happens in North Carolina has an impact on us in South Carolina as well.
Well, we love that, and we feel the same way. And it's great to have this kind of regional thinking and regional leadership. And we're all going to benefit from it. Let's stay in South Carolina now. Your state, Governor, has done so well over an extended period of time recruiting new businesses to the state. It's a great list. It's a long list. I could probably recite several. I'll save our audience, but it's a great list, as you know.
I'll recite some for you in a minute.
You do, yeah, you will. But what I want to ask also is, in addition to that new business recruitment, which you're so good at, on small businesses, how is your administration approaching the job of supporting the existing businesses, in particular the small businesses, entrepreneurship, and maybe if you can focus a bit on technology and innovation, businesses that
we want to keep the taxes low. We want to have good law enforcement so people are safe. We have all sorts of grants. I think in the pandemic and the CARES Act, we had, I think, over $60 million that went to small businesses to help them get back on their feet and stay on their feet. And I've asked the legislature this time for $123 million. This is state money to go to help them have grants. Small business is the key to everything. If you don't have the small businesses, you're not going to have anything else. We understand that because they would support the large businesses as well. But we try to recruit. We try to keep our skills, the trades going. We have a program called Be Pro, Be Proud. It's innovative. It's a converted great big 18-wheeler that has all sorts of the latest technology in welding and HVAC and all sorts of those kind of skills. And it is booked up months in advance. So they go to the high schools and show the students these skilled trades that are available that really pay well. We also, one thing we do in recruiting business and helping businesses with our technical college system. Ours started out back in the 50s. It's strong. It's 16 different institutions. They all work together. They cooperate with the high schools. We're going down and teaching and training high school students. In fact, at Clemson University, it's a remarkable thing. Our research universities work together. And at Clemson and the International Center for Automotive Research, which is fabulous in itself, one thing they do there is they have technical college, high school students, technical college students, students from Clemson, PhD candidates, master's candidates, and all of those working with the engineers and scientists and the others, in this case, primarily BMW, working shoulder to shoulder in the plant up there, inventing new things every day. It is quite something to see. And in Columbia, we have, I think it's the only such thing in the United States that we know of. It's a digital transformation lab. And they're on the University of South Carolina campus. We have in the same building, in the same offices, all shoulder to shoulder, people from IBM, Samsung, Siemens, of course, USC, and Yaskawa, which is a Japanese robot company. And they're bumping into each other and inventing things all day long. It's spectacular. A great success story was Arthrex. It makes medical equipment, as you know. They settled in Anderson University is there. And of course, they have a great nursing component. Tri-County Tech is there. Clemson has nursing and engineer students going over there working with them. Those are the kind of things that we're doing. We're putting all this talent and assets together. And it just ends up, it's like magic. And that's how we're trying to get our people trained And with Ready SC, which is part of our Department of Commerce, if there's a business that wants to grow, or a business that wants to come here, a business wants to come here from any place in the world, we'll send a team from our technical college system over to their plant, wherever it is, their business, study that and come back and set up the kind of curriculum that will train the people for their work.
Well, that's amazing. And I'm not sure it's magic. It sounds to me like a smart process and a lot of hard work. But, you know, I'm aware that South Carolina is regularly ranking as, you know, one of the top places to do business. But what you just described is, I think, a rising ranking on talent and workforce development. So
that's right.
I'm excited to see where South Carolina will go from here.
Yeah, you know, and I know it's all about the people. It's all about what they can do, and you have to have things happening that inspire them, and you have to have opportunities and assets available to let them decide what they want to do, and then have the opportunity to do it. Sometimes it costs money. Sometimes it just means telling them about it.
So, Governor, I have one final question, and this is about transportation, and maybe just as I lead into it, you know, in the Charlotte region, there are several organizations, many like the Carolina Panthers, where our slogan is 2 states, 1 team, as you know. But many organizations like ours who are working across state lines, they have employees and customers in both North and South Carolina. What things can we do to ensure more seamless operations and experiences for those employees and those consumers? And what advice do you have to the business community as you think about the future of transportation and future transportation investments in our region?
Well, we do need investment in transportation. We've got here and infrastructure in general, the opportunity zones that our Senator Tim Scott, you remember, he was the author of that. In fact, we had a $314 million investment of an agricultural technology campus in Hampton County, where they have about 1,000 acres, and it's indoor growing with all sorts of high-tech watering systems and all of that, and they're going to have canning and packaging and all at the same campus. It's a lot of high-tech things. But I think what we need to cooperate. We need to talk to each other. We need to understand that the state line doesn't mean a thing. Same thing in Georgia, for example. The Department of Defense is turning Fort Gordon into their cyber command. They're spending billions of dollars there. The University of South Carolina is deeply involved in that. In fact, our President Castleman at the University of South Carolina when he was a 3-star general, he was one involved in setting up that cyber command part of. So it's just staying in touch and putting the assets together. The state lines really don't mean anything. But in order to do that, you got to let the free market operate. You have to keep your taxes low. You have to have the assets available to teach and train the people. And then you have to show and tell. You have to show these companies and people what you have and why they ought to be here.
Well, Governor, you certainly have a great story to show and to tell, and we're going to finish up here. We thank you very much. The Charlotte Regional Business Alliance appreciates your time today and your insights, and we are glad to be moving forward together with you and everyone in South Carolina.
I appreciate that, and be sure to tell my friend Roy Cooper hello. We were attorneys general together, and now we're governors together. I haven't seen him in a while, but I look forward to it. And anytime you want to do something like this, we're happy to participate, because we always learn something.
That sounds great to us. Governor, thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, I'm Fred Whitfield, President and Vice Chairman of Hornet Sports and Entertainment. I'm proud to be here today with our governor, Governor Roy Cooper, representing the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance. We're here to have a conversation and a discussion with the governor, who I'm very fortunate to call a friend. The governor and I go back several years and met happenstantially around House Bill 2, the infamous bathroom bill. I'm honored to say that I was one of 6 business leaders around the state that spent almost a year in Raleigh working very closely with the governor with the Speaker of the House, with the President Pro Tem of the Senate, with the minority Senate leader, and the House minority leader on the Democratic side. And it was a tough year, but it was one that we built a lot of camaraderie, worked together, fought together to come up with a compromise, bipartisan bill, and it could only be done with the leadership of our governor. I was in those intense meetings with Andrea Smith and Charles Bowman and Ned Kern, Dale Jenkins and Brad Wilson. Got to know the governor's leadership team of Ken Udy and Stephen Bryant and William McKinney. It was quite a task to put our state back on the economic recovery road. And again, it was the leadership of our governor that brought us all together in what culminated in House Bill 142, which was that repeal bill that gave us progress in the right direction and allowed our economy to get back on track. So from that, we moved on to the governor's North Carolina Business Council. Very fortunate to serve there in a bipartisan group that he's brought together from across our state of big businesses, small businesses, really because we all love North Carolina. And he had the goal of bringing us together to talk about how we keep moving forward. And then last but not least, we've grown even closer with our North Carolina Economic Recovery Task Force that I'm so fortunate to be a part of, that Andrea Smith leads with Dale Jenkins. And it really is how we bring our state back, how we recover coming out of the pandemic, and how we do it together as a state and then in our respective communities. So today, Governor, thank you for being here. I'd like to just start right here. Roughly 12 months ago, our state and our world was shut down. 2020 has been unlike any year any of us have ever experienced or could even imagine. We're not out of the woods yet, but there's certainly hope on the horizon. What has it been like being the leader of a state during a global pandemic?
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be with you and to share the memories that we've had over the last couple of years and bringing our state forward. I'm so excited about where we're going to. I'll have to admit, Fred, that global pandemic was not on my checklist of challenges I thought I was going to have to face as governor. But governors across the country stepped up and did what we needed to do to protect people from COVID-19 and to get us on the road to recovery. I am so optimistic about the future. We have done a great job in finding opportunity in crisis. Our phone's ringing off the hook from companies that are looking to move and to expand in North Carolina. And I think the reason for it is that we have a stable, balanced approach to this pandemic. We have a strong workforce that is talented. We have some of the best universities, community colleges in the world. And I believe that this is a time where we can really take off. The Charlotte area, in both the North and South Carolina portions of that, your alliance, I think it is poised to take off now. We've worked together with bringing in a lot of good paying jobs into that area, and I think the future is promising. We have to make sure we can't celebrate too soon. We have to still be careful, wear a mask, make sure that we are being responsible. But at the same time, we're getting people vaccinated. I believe we're going to be turning the corner soon, and I'm optimistic about the future for the great state of North Carolina.
Thank you, Governor. You know, I can tell you that I personally and everyone within our Hornets family is thrilled that we're able to bring fans back into the Spectrum Center to watch our young team play. Clearly, the pandemic has hurt everyone, both personally and in business. And in many ways, some industries are thriving while others are really struggling, such as the hospitality industry. As we transition into the recovery mode, share with us your vision of how the Charlotte region can lead the way in economic revitalization.
Fred, I know that your business has been hurt as much as anybody. The hospitality, leisure, restaurant, bars, those that attract people and have people in close proximity were the businesses that were hurt the worst by this pandemic. And I want to thank you and the Hornets for the careful way that you've approached all of this. You got an exciting team on the court this year. I think you're playoff bound. And so I hope that you can go deep into the NBA playoffs and hope that we can steadily increase the number of fans that can go to the games in a safe way. But I know that a lot of families have experienced death and disease. People have lost jobs. A lot of women, strong women who had been in the workforce, were forced to come home and to take care of the home front. A lot of parents had children at home that they did not expect to have. Educators had to work hard in trying to teach children remotely. Our frontline workers, our healthcare providers have been so strong, our first responders. I'm so grateful for everybody who stepped up, but it has been a hard year for North Carolinians. But one thing that I have learned, we are resilient. You can see it from the neighbor who goes shopping for the senior neighbor and leaves groceries on the porch. You can see it from grandchildren waving to grandparents through the window of the rest home and passing them notes and singing to them. You can see it with the healthcare workers who are putting in the brave work night in and night out. We're going to come out of this. We're going to pay attention to the businesses that have been hurt and also pat businesses on the back that have found opportunity in crisis and that who are actually growing jobs. I did several job announcements just today here in our state. And when you look at the Charlotte area in technology, in finance, and fintech, all of the community colleges and universities in that area, there's a lot to like. The quality of life is going to be substantial and fantastic for people who decide to expand their business here. So I'm looking forward to us emerging from this pandemic, helping those businesses that have been hurt, hopefully getting people back together again. And I just want everybody to stick with us a little while longer. Sometimes if you slow down before you reach the goal line and start celebrating too early, somebody will come and knock the ball out of your hand. And we do not want that to happen here in North Carolina.
Thank you for that, Governor. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Dr. Mandy Cohen and Walker Wilson and their team for their phenomenal leadership, along with you and the rest of your team, in really helping navigate us through this. As a voice of business, the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance believes we must be intentional about creating a more inclusive and equitable place to live and work. One of our key strategies is driving racial equity in the business community. We're encouraged by the efforts of so many of our employers when it comes to hiring and developing, retaining, advancing diverse talent, and know there is still much more work to be done. What are your thoughts on how we can work together to create a more inclusive economy?
I was glad to work with you in fighting the discriminatory House Bill 2, and now we have it all off of the books. It's really important for us to send a message of inclusivity and that we are a welcoming area and state. One of the things that I did coming into state government, I knew that I wanted a state government that looked like the people that it served and protects. And I appointed by far the most diverse cabinet in the history of our state. It also happens to be the most qualified and competent in the history of our state. Businesses like yours and others have understood that diversity is a strength. Diversity increases the bottom line because when you get more points of view, your product ends up being better. But we know that we still face systemic racism that is ingrained in our education, healthcare, economic system, and we do need to be intentional about rooting that out and making our economy more inclusive for all. some great things going on in Charlotte. I know that you have some investments with Lloyd Yates and Malcolm Coley and a number of people who have invested in Black-owned businesses to try to make sure that they can thrive. And Hugh McCall, I think, heading that up as well. Yes. In North Carolina, I have a historically underutilized business part of my Department of Administration that is working hard, and we've conducted some studies about how we do purchasing and contracting in North Carolina over the last number of years, and it wasn't what we wanted to see, and we know that we intentionally need to do better. We need to make sure that historically underutilized businesses, minority-owned businesses have an equal shot at getting state contracts. That's good for them, and it's good for taxpayers, because if you increase the competition, you get better prices and better service. So we need to continue to make sure that we're working to strive for racial equity. I appointed the Andrea Harris Task Force to help us tackle systemic racism in our healthcare, education, and economics. And we do know that this pandemic is shining a light on a lot of the challenges that we know we already face. We need to get healthcare to every North Carolinian, and by expanding Medicaid in our state, we could get 500,000 to 600,000 working North Carolinians covered, and help reduce private insurance premiums by 7 to 11%, because when you reduce uncompensated care, everybody wins, and it brings in jobs. And I hope the businesses there can help us work with the General Assembly to try and get more health care coverage for people across our state. But we must fight racism at every turn, and we must send this signal across the country and across the world that North Carolina is a welcoming place for everyone.
So, Governor, building on our last question, we know that there's a disproportionate rate of white Americans receiving the vaccine compared to other races. How do you think that can be addressed and we be able to incorporate more equity in the rollout of the vaccine?
Fred, I want everybody to get a vaccine. I want us to create this herd immunity and put this pandemic behind us. But we know that there is a lot of vaccine skepticism, and we know that underserved communities, people who are working on the front lines, people who are living in closer quarters, people are often disproportionately affected by this pandemic. And our Black population and our Hispanic Latinx population has been hit harder than other populations in our state. It's one of the reasons why when we set up our vaccination protocols, we built our own database, and we've been cited nationally by Bloomberg as having the #1 transparent information of any state in the country. We know 100% the race and ethnicity of the people who receive every single vaccination in North Carolina. And you can't tackle a problem until you can see it. That data has allowed us to see it. And the first few weeks showed us what you just said, that vaccines were being disproportionately given to white people. My mission, and what I told our medical providers to do, is to get this vaccine off the shelves and into people's arms before the next shipment comes, and make sure those arms look like North Carolina. And we have improved significantly in this effort. We partnered with private and nonprofit. Appreciate what you, the Hornets and Spectrum Center and Novant did. We did the Panthers and Bank of America and Atrium, and we targeted underserved communities and minority communities. And as a result, we've seen significant improvement. Just this past week, 10% of our vaccines have gone to people who identify as Hispanic, and that's close to the percentage of the population. Over the last 4 to 5 weeks, we've been around 20% Black North Carolinians who have received vaccinations, which is getting close to the population of the state. Fast and fair is our motto. We want to make sure that we get these vaccines out to people quickly and equitably. And Fred, it's going to help us turn the corner to make sure we are prosperous again and to make sure we are a healthy North Carolina. I must say that I am so proud of our state and the medical and scientific research that has been done here. When you look at therapeutics like remdesivir, you look at North Carolina, when you see a lot of the vaccine research that's gone on coronaviruses, those clinical trials happening in North Carolina. We have become a biotechnology hub in our state, and I see even brighter days ahead for healthcare and research. And I know a lot of plans are being made in the Charlotte area in this arena, and it's very exciting news that will be coming forward in the months and years ahead. So I look forward to working with all of you. Let's get everybody a vaccination. Let's turn the corner on this, and let's come out of this stronger than ever before.
Well, Governor, speaking of turning the corner, with almost 12% of Americans receiving both doses of the vaccine, and North Carolinians at almost 13%, how quickly do you anticipate life returning to normal? And what do you think the new normal will look like?
Well, I think it's going to happen fast. I think by May 1st, every adult will be able to be eligible to get a vaccination. We're well over a quarter of adult North Carolinians having received at least one shot. So what I'm hoping is that we can get back to near normal. However, we have been flung about 10 years into the future. And I think we've all learned a lot during this pandemic. We want to forget the bad things, but some things we learned that are positive. We learned that telemedicine is a great way to deliver healthcare to the people of North Carolina. We've learned that we probably don't need as many in-person meetings as we thought we needed. We probably learned that we've got to make sure that every North Carolinian has access to healthcare. We've learned that we've got to get high-speed internet access to every part of our state for education, for telemedicine, for small businesses that need access to global markets. And I think we've learned that we can do some good things working from home. I think everybody's going to recalibrate a bit as to what normal really is. We're going to continue to be as careful as we can because this virus is going to be with us for a while. We're going to find ways to fight it. But I'm ready to come and cheer on the Hornets again and having a full arena. And I can see those days ahead. I don't know quite how soon it's going to be, but I can see those days ahead, and I'm looking forward to it, Fred.
Well, thank you, Governor. And I just really want to thank you for taking time to speak to us today. Also want to thank you and your team, your phenomenal team, for the leadership of our state. We all deeply appreciate it. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Fred. Enjoyed talking to you. And thanks to everyone at the Alliance.
Thank you so much.
Okay, many thanks to our governors, Tom and Fred. It was incredible. And today we visited 4 metro regions. We hope you feel like you got away a little bit, away from Charlotte. And we'll use these learnings, of course, to help shape our Alliance work. So again, many thanks to our sponsors. And particularly thanks to all of you as we move forward together, because we absolutely intend to make this region the most vibrant, healthy, innovative, and inclusive economy for all, more than any place else. So thanks for a great morning together. Remember to wear your masks and have a great afternoon.